My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old, a stay-at-home mom. My husband Benjamin, 34, works a regular office job. We have a beautiful little girl named Mia, and after 8 years of marriage, our 6-year-old daughter has both of us wrapped around her finger. I also have an older sister, Lily, who just turned 35. She recently got divorced due to personality clashes and is now a single mom to her son Logan, who is 4 years old. One day, we had planned a trip to the zoo with just the 4 of us. Unfortunately, I caught a cold and had to stay in bed. Benjamin decided to take the day off from work and still take Mia and Logan to the zoo. It ended up being just him and Lily alone despite them being in-laws. Little did I know, that day would mark a change. Fast forward to another day. I was walking down the shopping street on my way home from the grocery store when I glimpsed Benjamin and Lily in a cafe by chance. I was puzzled but had to pick up Mia from after-school care soon, so I headed home without dwelling on it. That night, when Benjamin got home, he casually mentioned they ran into each other and sought shelter from the rain in the cafe. I believed him. However, from then on, he started coming home late more often, asking for more pocket money, and going out on his days off. When Lily visited, their relationship seemed more intimate than before, leaving me with a string of suspicions. Despite this, I trusted him. Benjamin still adored Mia, and we seemed to have a good relationship. Little did I know, I was the only one who thought everything was fine. Then, an incident occurred that shattered my illusion. One day, as usual, Lily came over to our house. A friend invited me on a trip. Would you mind taking care of Logan for about a week? It's in the Bahamas, she asked persistently. Initially hesitant, I understood Lily had it tough since her divorce. Despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed. As Lily's departure approached, Benjamin announced he would be out of town for a few days on a business trip. Surprisingly, it was the same day as Lily's trip to the Bahamas. Was this merely a coincidence? Was it my imagination that Benjamin seemed secretive and overly attached to his phone? Was it my sister's tough times clouding my judgment? The morning of Lily's trip, she arrived with Logan. I noticed immediately that something was wrong. Logan's hand was hot, his body feverish. Lily confirmed he'd had a fever since yesterday. We can't delay. We need to get him to a hospital quickly, I insisted. But then Lily dropped a bombshell. I'll leave Logan to you. Shocked, I protested. You can't possibly leave a sick child behind. I have no choice. We've planned this trip for a while. Please take good care of him, she said, brushing off my concerns. Despite my pleas, she left, leaving me to care for Logan, whose health took precedence over everything else. I couldn't believe it. Logan was suffering with a high fever, and yet his condition worsened from the stress of moving around. I quickly tucked him into bed and placed a cold, damp towel on his forehead. While preparing an ice pillow in the freezer, my husband woke up. Honey, it seems like Logan has a fever, he remarked. Really? My sister's awful. She left Logan like this to go on a trip. I replied, frustration evident in my voice. It can't be helped. They've had this trip planned for a long time, and it's too late to cancel now. You too, dear. Poor Logan. If you're so concerned, then you should take care of him. Honey, can you do something about your business trip? If Logan has a contagious disease, he might pass it on to Mia. I'll take care of Logan, and I need you to take care of Mia, I suggested, hoping my husband would prioritize our daughter over his work. But my hope was dashed. What? That's impossible. If you're worried, why not leave her with your parents? That won't work. Our parents are busy with their jobs, and your parents live too far away to drop her off at this hour. Then it can't be helped. Logan will be fine if we let him rest. Don't worry, he said dismissively. Please don't be so casual about this. What do you want me to do? I can't change my plans. Oh, it's time. I have to go now. Bye. With that, he hurriedly left. Left alone, I immediately called my parents. They couldn't take time off from their sudden work commitments, but they agreed to leave work early and pick up Mia as soon as possible. I felt relieved when my mom assured me they were on their way. Until my mom arrives, I'll have to keep Mia locked in her room. I feel sorry for her, but it can't be helped, I thought to myself. Meanwhile, Logan's condition seemed to be worsening. He started coughing in addition to the fever. In the afternoon, my mom, who had left work early, arrived. I handed Mia over to her and headed straight to the pediatric clinic with Logan. In the car, the motion seemed to make Logan uncomfortable, which was hard to see. The doctor said it was just a common cold and prescribed a fever reducer. He asked us to observe Logan and call an ambulance if his fever went up or if he seemed delirious. I'm sorry, Mom, for leaving Maya with you. I apologize. Don't worry about it. More importantly, I'm concerned about Logan, my mom reassured me. After hanging up with my mom, I decided to call my husband's office. I needed to find out where he was staying on his business trip, just in case. The reply I received was, I should be on paid vacation. I sighed, lifting my voice towards the heavens as if making a plea. A dreaded suspicion was beginning to solidify. Opening my husband's laptop, I had never looked through it before, but a quick scan of his browsing history revealed his destination, the Bahamas. Both flight tickets and hotel bookings were arranged by him. I recognized the hotel's name. It was the same place my sister had mentioned. My sister and husband in the Bahamas at the same time, staying in the same hotel. Such a coincidence seemed next to impossible. The mere fact that my husband was in the Bahamas, taking paid leave while claiming to be on a business trip, was alarming. Curious, I looked at my smartphone, checking my sister's social media posts. There were no new posts, but looking at her recent ones, although not clearly visible, I could tell she was frequently with someone. The glimpses of clothing I could catch were all too familiar. What changed my suspicion into certainty was a photo where the wristwatch of the man she was with was visible, a watch I had given my husband. Though not expensive, it was from a unique manufacturer, making the odds that another man dressed like my husband, wearing the same watch, would appear in my sister's photo infinitesimally small. And then I found the conclusive piece of evidence, a photo titled Window Shopping, with my sister's reflection on the glass. On the edge of that photo, another person's reflection was undeniably my husband. My blissfully ignorant sister must have posted the picture without noticing her husband's reflection in the glass. My hands trembling, I saved all the pictures. There was no mistake about it. My sister and husband were having an affair. Right now, they were together. I felt everything I had built up with my husband crumbling down all at once. I tried calling them numerous times, but soon a voicemail message started playing. It seemed they had turned off their phones. Logan's fever still hadn't broken. Seeing his distressed face, anger started to rise within me. Despite our young child's suffering, despite being in such a difficult situation right now, my sister and husband were probably laughing, enjoying their vacation in the Bahamas. Could there be a worse story? I was trembling with anger, wondering what to do, but that could wait. First, I needed Logan to recover. However, Logan's fever showed no signs of abating. In fact, it seemed to be increasing. I was shocked when I took his temperature. 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Children tend to run high fevers. He had experienced 40 degrees before, but never this high. Why isn't the fever reducer working? Logan was completely drained. It looked painful for him to even move. What should I do? I fought hard to suppress the panic that was threatening to overtake me. I need to call an ambulance, I decided, clutching my smartphone tightly. Mama, Logan murmured in a small voice, his face contorted in pain. He called for his aunt. Unforgivable. I will never forgive them, I thought as my vision seemed to turn red with anger. Logan's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. A week had passed since then. Contrary to my feelings of sorrow, today was a clear day. Staring blankly at the vast blue sky, tears began to spill over. I had lost count of how many times I had cried, yet the tears wouldn't stop. I could feel Maya's hands trembling in mine. My daughter was crying too. As I lifted her up, I saw my parents weeping uncontrollably over her small, trembling shoulders, along with everyone else in attendance. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated. I put Maya down and saw my sister's name on the screen. Hello. Emily. Long time no see. I just got back from the Bahamas. I've just landed at the airport. I'm off to pick up Logan. Thanks for looking after him, my sister said cheerfully. It felt like a phone call from another world. He's gone to heaven, I muttered to myself. What? My sister on the other end of the phone didn't seem to understand what I had said. Huh? Heaven? What are you talking about? I don't understand. That's what I'm saying. He went to heaven while you were on your trip to the Bahamas. Huh? I don't understand what you're saying. You'll understand when you get here, I replied, my voice heavy with grief. The funeral is over and we're at the crematorium. Huh? Crematorium? My sister sounded confused. When I tried to explain the location of the crematorium, she abruptly hung up the phone. Logan? My sister just got out of the taxi and dramatically changed her expression as she started running. She called his name and looked around, but Logan was nowhere to be found. Where is he? He's not here. Of course he's not. What do you mean? I slowly pointed in one direction towards the crematorium. The crematorium doesn't emit smoke like it used to, but it's true. He's being cremated right now, I whispered. Logan? That day, the day you dropped off Logan. His fever shot up to 42 degrees Fahrenheit all at once. 42 degrees Fahrenheit. The antipyretic we got from the pediatrician had no effect. His condition worsened rapidly. We had to call an ambulance in a panic. So that means Logan is. I don't want to answer that. We're in the middle of a funeral, I said, spreading my arms wide, pointing at the crematorium. Hey, what does this mean? What happened to Logan? Why are you here? Someone shouted in place of my speechless sister. It was my husband. Unbelievably, he had come here with my sister. What does that matter right now? What about Logan? Of course it matters. Not losing to my husband's voice, I shouted back, how can you two just abandon your family and go on a secret love trip? Moreover, Logan had a fever, and even when I said I needed help, you ignored me and went on your trip. Are you out of your mind? Who? What are you talking about? I already know. When I asked your company, they said you had taken paid leave. I checked your computer and found a booking for a trip to the Bahamas. You were on the same flight, if not the same hotel, as my sister. You think you can just claim it's coincidence? I must have had a terrifying look on my face. My husband lost his words under my intimidating stare. Tell me, Emily, did he die? Do you have the luxury to ask such a question now? What do you think we're doing here? Why do you think I'm in a simple, modest dress, standing at a crematorium? Don't you get it? No, 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 no. My sister's scream dominated the scene as she broke down crying. I looked down at her with cold eyes. You have no right to cry. You abandoned your son to go on a secret trip with my husband. You're the worst kind of person. I was lonely. I was so lonely all by myself, so I just what? Reached out to your sister's husband? What do you mean? I've done nothing wrong. It's not my fault. The real villain here is my ex-husband who refused to take our son. And it's not just him, it's also the fault of our parents who never helped me with the child. And Emily too, my sister, never taking responsibility. I didn't choose to have a child. I didn't choose to be a single mother. I wanted him to take our son if we were going to get divorced, but he refused. I've been struggling alone because of that. But I didn't. I couldn't. Logan? Lily's voice broke as she said his name. It was her lover. My husband comforted her as she collapsed into tears. It seemed they were no longer interested in hiding their affair. Don't blame everyone else for your problems. Our parents and I have helped as much as we could. You can't justify leaving a sick child to go on a tryst. Not realizing how rotten you are, you're the worst. Hey Emily, isn't that a bit harsh? Lily just lost Logan. She's in shock. Shut up, accomplice. I'm divorcing you, so be ready to pay what you owe. What? What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. My husband and I argued while my sister cried. It was a chaotic situation. Our parents approached my tear-streaked sister, started blaming them. To add, Mom, why didn't you take care of Logan properly? Why did you let Logan? Suddenly, there was a loud slap. Enough with your nonsense. It was my father who slapped my sister's face. Don't blame others when you were the one who abandoned your child. And having an affair with your sister's husband, you shameless woman. I'm ashamed to have raised you like this. My sister cried even louder at her father's words. I wanted to punch my husband too. I was glaring at him when, Mommy. I heard a little boy's voice. My sister quickly turned around. There. What? Logan? My sister ran towards them, but the man quickly moved Logan out of her reach. Hey, what are you doing, Andrew? The man holding Logan was Andrew, my sister's ex-husband. He was the one who divorced my sister, citing irreconcilable differences. What are you doing leaving Logan like that? He's my son too. I complied with the court's decision that it's better for a mother to have custody, even though you insisted on not giving me parental rights. But you wouldn't let me see him, no matter how many times I asked. My worry proved justified. You're not fit to be Logan's mother. Just shut up. You should just pay the child support. I'd pay any amount for Logan, but you left him without care. You don't even know how critical his condition was, and you're out on your affair trip. That day, when Logan's condition deteriorated, I panicked and called an ambulance. When we got to the hospital and while he was being treated, I called her parents and Andrew, Logan's father. He was surprised when I told them my sister was on a trip with my husband. After that, Logan, who was discharged from the hospital in good health, was resting at Andrew's and his parents' house. Wait a minute, you're saying Logan's okay? Then whose? My husband asked, puzzled, staring at the crematorium. It's her grandmother. Our grandmother. Mother to me and my sister, and great-grandmother to Maya and Logan, I replied. She was in her advanced years and bedridden, living in a nursing facility. She passed away recently from old age. Despite being bedridden, our grandma was quite lucid and doted on her great-grandchildren, Maya and Logan. Whenever we visited her at the nursing home, she would light up with joy. Her sudden departure left us, my parents and Maya, in deep sorrow, unable to do anything but grieve. Logan, who had been ill, couldn't attend the funeral. However, since he'd called my sister to the crematorium, Andrew was there. His fever had subsided, and he looked well. You tricked us. No one said Logan had died. My sister accused us with her eyes, but it was we who had the right to accuse. I didn't hear about Grandma's death either, she snapped back. I tried calling both of you several times to tell you about Grandma's passing, but the line was always busy. Considering how kind she was to you, it's unfathomable that you're this late. Enough. You're all making fools of us. Logan, let's go home. You don't want to stay with such a man. You want to be with Mom, right? Andrew, give Logan back right now. Will you ever stop? The one who scolded my sister, who was bearing down on Andrew, was her father. Do you still think you can keep Logan with you after all of this? What you've done could have gotten you in legal trouble for child abandonment. You've proven to be an unfit mother. Never think you'll be allowed near Logan again. Logan will be raised by Andrew. Dad, how could you? We've decided to fully support Andrew and hire a lawyer. You are no longer our daughter. We're cutting ties with you. Mom. My sister's face went pale at her parents' harsh words. I stood in front of her with a firm stance. I'm divorcing my husband, so why don't the two of you stick together? You seem fine leaving your children behind to go on an overseas trip. Upon hearing this, my husband burst out, Emily, wait, it was just a lapse in judgment. Lily and I were just fooling around. The ones who matter to me are you and Mia. Then my sister also started shouting, what do you mean fooling around? You told me you no longer loved Emily and that I was the only one you loved. Stop the noise. I just love my daughter. Don't mess with me. As the storm reignited between my husband and my sister, we left the scene with my grandmother's ashes. After that, despite many disagreements with the help of a lawyer, I managed to settle everything. Logan went to live with his dad. I thought he might feel sad being away from his mother, but he was rather pleased. It turned out my sister wasn't functioning as a mother at all. My husband and I had our disputes. Well, more accurately, my husband was absent. After being scolded by both my parents and his, he was feeling down. Then our daughter landed the knockout punch. I don't need daddy. She might be only 6 years old, but girls mature quickly. She must have understood her father's despicable actions in her own way. When our daughter looked at my husband like he was a bug, I couldn't help but laugh. For my husband, who adored his daughter, no, my ex-husband, there could be no greater punishment. He was allowed to see his daughter, but whether she wanted to see him was up to her. And so, the storm came to an end. Maya and I returned to my parents' home and are living peacefully. My parents are thrilled to live with Mia. She's starting elementary school next year, so we're excited about the preparations. I plan to find a job when she starts school. Logan comes by every now and then with Andrew. He looks totally different. His face is brighter and he's always smiling. Meanwhile, my sister and my ex-husband seem to have ended their relationship quite easily. I guess it was really just a fling for my ex-husband. Perhaps upset about being disliked by his daughter, he dumped my sister without hesitation. However, his despicable affair with his wife's sister became known at his company, which questioned his character. He was relocated to a remote area that will make it even more difficult for him to see his daughter. As for my sister, after being abandoned by everyone, she seemed to live like an empty shell for a while. Then she disappeared. We filed a missing persons report, but I have a feeling we'll never find my sister. That's just the feeling I get.
The crunch of gravel under the tires signaled our arrival home. Hank and I had just returned from a blissful week-long anniversary trip, and I was eager to settle back into our peaceful suburban life in Ohio. As we stepped out of the car, a strange noise from inside the house made me pause. "Hank, did you hear that? Maybe there's someone in the house," I asked, my voice laced with anxiety. Hank dismissed my concern with a reassuring smile. "It's all right, sweetheart. Let me check it out." He strode towards the front door, keys jingling in his hand. I followed closely behind, my heart pounding in my chest. As we entered the living room, I was initially relieved to find no intruders. However, that relief quickly turned to shock as I took in the scene before me. There, lounging on our couch, was Hank's mother, Marjorie, and his sister, Belinda. They looked up at us with an air of entitlement, as if they had every right to be there. "What took you so long? We've been waiting," Marjorie commanded, her voice sharp and demanding. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the invasion of our home. Hank, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He greeted his mother and sister warmly, as if their unexpected presence was a pleasant surprise. As I peered around the cluttered living room, taking in the suitcases and personal belongings strewn about, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. It was clear that Marjorie and Belinda had no intention of leaving any time soon. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Belinda waved her hand dismissively. "We're family, Elena. We don't need an invitation." I bristled at her casual disregard for our privacy. Hank, sensing my discomfort, placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, honey. They're just here for a little visit." But as I looked into Marjorie's calculating eyes and Belinda's smug expression, I knew this was more than a simple visit. They had come to stake their claim on our lives, and I felt powerless to stop them. Over the next few hours, I watched helplessly as Marjorie and Belinda made themselves at home. They rearranged furniture, critiqued my housekeeping, and demanded to be waited on hand and foot. Hank, ever the dutiful son and brother, catered to their every whim, leaving me to bear the brunt of their constant demands and criticisms. As the day wore on, the weight of their presence grew heavier. I retreated to the kitchen, seeking solace in the familiar task of preparing dinner. But even there, I couldn't escape Marjorie's watchful gaze. "You need to start cooking proper meals. Fast food won't do for us," she declared, her tone dripping with disapproval. I bit back a retort, knowing that arguing would only make matters worse. Hank, who had joined us in the kitchen, remained silent, his loyalty clearly lying with his mother. That night, as I lay in bed next to Hank, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The peaceful life we had built together felt like it was slipping away, replaced by a suffocating sense of intrusion and betrayal. I closed my eyes, trying to will away the tears that threatened to fall. I knew I had to find a way to reclaim my home and my life, but with Hank's unwavering support for his family, I feared I would have to face this battle alone. As I drifted off into a restless sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. How had my once happy marriage come to this? The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the kitchen table. I sat there, nursing a cup of coffee, trying to find a moment of peace before the day's chaos began. The sound of footsteps approaching made me tense. "Good morning, Elena," Marjorie said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you're up early. I hope you're planning on making a proper breakfast for us." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Of course, Marjorie. What would you like?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Something hearty. None of that prepackaged nonsense. You need to start cooking proper meals. Fast food won't do for us." I bit back a retort, knowing that arguing would only make matters worse. As I began preparing breakfast, Belinda sauntered into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room critically. "I don't believe in boundaries between family members," she declared, picking up a framed photo of Hank and me from our anniversary trip. "You don't mind if I look around, do you?" Before I could respond, she was already rummaging through the drawers and cabinets, invading every corner of my kitchen. I felt my frustration mounting, but Hank's entrance into the room stopped me from speaking up. "Smells great, honey," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Mom, Belinda, I hope you slept well." As Hank engaged in pleasant conversation with his mother and sister, I felt increasingly isolated. It was as if I was a stranger in my own home, my opinions and feelings disregarded at every turn. Later that day, I sought solace at the community center, where I volunteered. As I sorted through donated clothing, my friend Claire noticed my distress. "Elena, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I poured out my heart to her, sharing the frustrations and helplessness I felt with Marjorie and Belinda's constant intrusions. Claire listened patiently, offering a sympathetic ear. "I know it's tough, but try to be patient," she advised. "They're family, after all. Maybe things will get better with time." I nodded, appreciating her support, but deep down, I knew that patience alone wouldn't solve my problems. I needed to find a way to assert myself and reclaim my life. When I returned home that evening, I found Marjorie and Belinda lounging in the living room, watching television. They barely acknowledged my presence as I walked in. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. Marjorie sniffed. "An hour? In my day, dinner was always on the table by 6 o'clock sharp." I retreated to the kitchen, my heart heavy with the weight of their constant criticism. As I chopped vegetables and stirred pots, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could endure this suffocating atmosphere. Hank joined me in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I leaned into his embrace, craving his support. "It's just a lot, having your mother and sister here all the time." He sighed. "I know it's an adjustment, but they're family. We have to make it work." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. But as I watched Hank leave the kitchen to join his mother and sister, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of how to reclaim my home and my life. I knew that something had to change, but with Hank's unwavering loyalty to his family, I feared that I would have to face this challenge alone. I closed my eyes, determined to find the strength within myself to stand up for what I deserved. No matter how difficult the path ahead might be, I knew I had to fight for my happiness and my peace of mind. Days turned into weeks, and Marjorie and Belinda's presence in our home became increasingly suffocating. I found myself constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate their every need and whim to avoid their scathing criticism. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the bedroom, I heard a commotion coming from the living room. I rushed out to find Belinda standing over my favorite quilt, a large coffee stain spreading across the delicate fabric. "Oh, Elena, I'm so sorry," she said, her tone insincere. "I accidentally spilled my coffee. But it's just a quilt, right? You're overreacting. It's not a big deal." I felt my blood boil as I gently picked up the quilt, assessing the damage. This quilt had been a gift from my grandmother, a cherished family heirloom. Belinda's casual dismissal of its importance cut me to the core. As I carried the quilt to the kitchen sink, trying to salvage it, I noticed that the drawers and cabinets had been rummaged through. My personal belongings were strewn about, as if someone had been snooping. I confronted Belinda, my voice shaking with anger. "Have you been going through my things?" She shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. "I was just looking for a coaster. You really should keep your house more organized, Elena." I felt my frustration reaching a boiling point. I had tolerated their intrusions and disrespect for too long. It was time to take a stand. That evening, as Hank and I prepared for bed, I finally found the courage to speak up. "Hank, I can't live like this anymore. Your mother and sister are invading every part of our life. They have to leave." Hank's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. "They're family, Elena. If you can't handle that, maybe you're the one who should go." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always known that Hank prioritized his mother and sister's needs above mine, but to hear him say it so bluntly shattered my heart. I lay awake that night, tears streaming down my face as I realized the gravity of the situation. My own husband had chosen his toxic family over me, leaving me to face this battle alone. The next morning, I found Marjorie in the kitchen, criticizing my cooking skills as usual. "Really, Elena, I don't know how you managed to keep a husband with these subpar meals." Something inside me snapped. I slammed the spatula down on the counter, my voice trembling with rage. "Enough, Marjorie. I have had enough of your constant belittling and disrespect. This is my home, and I deserve to be treated with kindness and dignity." Marjorie's eyes widened in shock, unused to being challenged. "How dare you speak to me like that? I am the matriarch of this family, and you will show me the respect I deserve." I stood my ground, my voice growing stronger. "Respect is earned, Marjorie, and you have done nothing to earn mine. You have invaded my home, criticized my every move, and turned my husband against me. I won't stand for it any longer." Hank entered the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" I turned to him, my eyes blazing with determination. "I'm done, Hank. I can't live like this anymore. If you can't stand up for me, for our marriage, then I have to do it myself." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving a stunned Hank and a fuming Marjorie behind. I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but I also knew that I had to fight for my own happiness and peace of mind. As I packed a bag, tears streaming down my face, I felt a sense of both sorrow and liberation. I was leaving behind the life I had built with Hank, but I was also taking the first step towards reclaiming my identity and my self-worth. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had to be strong, I had to be brave, and most importantly, I had to be true to myself. With a heavy heart and a small suitcase in hand, I arrived at my sister's home in a nearby town. Claire, my lifelong friend and confidante, greeted me at the door with open arms and a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Elena," she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. You deserve so much better." As we settled into her cozy living room, I poured out my heart to Claire, sharing the pain and betrayal I had endured at the hands of Hank and his family. She listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "You deserve respect, not this torment," Claire said, her voice firm with conviction. "You've given so much to your marriage, to Hank. It's time to focus on yourself and your own happiness." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so many years putting Hank's needs before my own, sacrificing my dreams and desires to be the perfect wife. But where had that gotten me? Alone, in my sister's guest room while my husband sided with his toxic mother and sister. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on the early years of my marriage to Hank. We had been so in love, so full of hope and promise. I remembered the way he used to look at me, his eyes filled with adoration and respect. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Hank's loyalty had shifted, his priorities rearranged. I realized now that I had been slowly losing myself, piece by piece, in an effort to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage. One evening, as Claire and I sat on the porch sipping tea, I confided in her about my fears for the future. "I don't know how to do this, Claire. I've been with Hank for so long. How do I start over?" She reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "One day at a time, Elena. You're stronger than you know, and you have me and your sister and so many others who love and support you." Her words gave me the courage I needed to take the next steps. I began to plan for my new life, searching for an apartment and reaching out to old friends for support. But even as I took these steps towards independence, my heart ached for the life I had left behind. I found myself reminiscing about the happy moments with Hank, the laughter and love we had shared. Late one night, as I lay awake in bed, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Hank. "I miss you," it read. "Please come home." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he had finally seen the error of his ways. Maybe he was ready to stand up for our marriage. But as quickly as the hope had come, it was extinguished by the memory of his cold words, his unwavering loyalty to his mother and sister. I knew that going back would only lead to more pain, more heartbreak. With a heavy sigh, I typed out a response. "I'm sorry, Hank, but I can't live like that anymore. I need to do what's best for me." Hitting send, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be moments of doubt and loneliness. But I also knew that I was taking the first steps towards reclaiming my life, my identity. I had spent so long living for others, putting their needs before my own. It was time to focus on my own happiness, my own dreams. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I had the strength and resilience to weather any storm. And with the support of my loved ones, I knew that I could build a new life for myself, one filled with joy, purpose, and the respect I deserved. Weeks turned into months, as I settled into my new life in a small apartment across town. The space was modest, but it was mine. A sanctuary free from the constant criticism and intrusion that had plagued me in my former home. I threw myself into decorating the apartment, choosing colors and furnishings that brought me joy. It was a small act of reclaiming my identity, of creating a space that reflected who I was and what I valued. But even as I found solace in my new surroundings, the ghosts of my past lingered. Memories of my life with Hank, both good and bad, seemed to lurk around every corner. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of old photographs, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Hank's name. "Hello?" I answered tentatively. "Elena." Hank's voice was strained. "Mom and Belinda say they miss you. You need to apologize and come back." I felt a surge of anger at his words. After everything I had endured, he still couldn't see the pain his family had caused me. "I'm not coming back, Hank," I said firmly. "I deserve better than the way they treated me, the way you allowed them to treat me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you want me to say, Elena. They're my family." "And I was your wife," I countered, my voice cracking with emotion, "but that didn't seem to matter when they were making my life a living hell." Hank sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, Elena. I really am. But I can't change who they are." I closed my eyes, realizing that this was the closure I needed. Hank would never stand up for me, never prioritize our marriage over his toxic family dynamics. "Goodbye, Hank," I said softly, ending the call before he could respond. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new life with renewed determination. I volunteered at the community center, finding fulfillment in helping others navigate their own challenges. But just as I was beginning to find my footing, I received a devastating blow. A thick envelope arrived in the mail, bearing the return address of Hank's lawyer. With trembling hands, I opened it to find divorce papers, cold and impersonal in their legal jargon. I knew our separation had been leading to this moment, but seeing it in black and white still took my breath away. Tears blurred my vision as I signed the papers, officially ending the marriage I had once believed would last a lifetime. As I struggled to come to terms with this new reality, I received another shock. Claire called me one evening, her voice tight with concern. "Elena, I hate to be the one to tell you this," she began hesitantly, "but I saw Hank out with another woman today. They looked close." I felt as though I had been punched in the gut. The ink was barely dry on our divorce papers, and Hank had already moved on. In the days that followed, I learned more about Hank's new girlfriend, Clara. She was younger than me, in her early 50s, with a successful career and a confident air about her. I couldn't help but compare myself to her, feeling the sting of inadequacy. Had I been so easily replaced? Was our decades-long marriage so meaningless to Hank? But even as I grappled with the pain of Hank's betrayal, I refused to let it break me. I had come too far, fought too hard for my independence to let this setback derail me. With a renewed sense of determination, I focused on my own healing and growth. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I had the strength to weather any storm. I was no longer the woman who had allowed herself to be diminished and disrespected. I was Elena, a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who knew her own worth, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. The annual neighborhood block party was in full swing, the air filled with the aroma of barbecue and the laughter of children playing. I had debated whether to attend, knowing that Hank and his family would likely be there, but Claire had convinced me that I couldn't hide away forever. As I navigated the crowded street, I spotted Marjorie and Belinda huddled together, their eyes narrowing as they caught sight of me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. Well, look who decided to show up," Marjorie sneered as I approached. "I'm surprised you had the nerve to come, after the way you abandoned your family." I felt my cheeks flush with anger, but I refused to let her see how much her words stung. "I didn't abandon anyone, Marjorie. I left a toxic situation that was destroying me," Belinda scoffed. "You're just selfish, Elena. You couldn't handle a little bit of family drama, so you ran away like a coward." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, a familiar figure appeared at Marjorie's side. It was Clara, Hank's new girlfriend, her arm linked possessively through his. It's no wonder Hank found someone new, Marjorie said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're a quitter, Elena. You didn't have the strength to make your marriage work. I felt as though I had been slapped. The sight of Clara standing there, a smug smile on her face, was like salt in an open wound. But as I stood there, facing the people who had caused me so much pain, something inside me snapped. I was done being a victim, done letting them control the narrative of my life. I squared my shoulders, looking Marjorie directly in the eye. You want to talk about family values, Marjorie? About loyalty and commitment? Then let's talk about what you did to your own sister. Marjorie's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. I don't know what you're talking about, she sputtered. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully crafted facade was about to crumble. You preached about the importance of family, but you betrayed your own flesh and blood, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. You stole your sister's inheritance, leaving her penniless and alone. And then you had the audacity to cut her out of your life when she needed you most. Belinda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hank looked stunned, his eyes darting between his mother and me. That's not true, Marjorie said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. It is true, and you know it. You're not the paragon of virtue you pretend to be, Marjorie. You're a hypocrite and a liar. I could feel the eyes of the other partygoers on us, the whispers and murmurs growing louder with each revelation. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt truly empowered. Clara stepped forward. Her face twisted with anger. How dare you speak to Marjorie that way? She hissed. You have no right. No, Clara, I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. You don't get to lecture me about rights. You inserted yourself into my family, into my marriage, without a second thought for the damage you were causing. I turned back to Marjorie, my gaze unwavering. I'm done letting you control me, Marjorie. I'm done letting you poison my life with your lies and your manipulation. From now on, I'm taking back my power, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my head held high. I could hear Marjorie sputtering behind me, Belinda's shrill voice rising in indignation. But I didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I had spoken my truth, exposed the ugliness that had been lurking beneath the surface for so long. And in doing so, I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life and my happiness. There would be more battles to come, more obstacles to overcome. But I knew now that I had the strength to face them head-on. I was no longer the meek, submissive wife who had let others dictate her fate. I was Elena, a woman who knew her own worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. In the weeks following the confrontation at the block party, I threw myself into my new life with a renewed sense of purpose. I volunteered more at the community center, taking on additional responsibilities and spearheading new projects. It was there that I found a sense of belonging and fulfillment that had been missing from my life for so long. The other volunteers, many of them women my age who had faced their own challenges and triumphs, became a source of strength and support. One afternoon, as I was sorting through donated books for the center's library, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned to see Clara, Hank's girlfriend, standing in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice wary. Clara stepped into the room, her eyes downcast. "I needed to talk to you, Elena, privately." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. Clara perched on the edge of a chair, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I need your help." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her words. "My help? With what?" Clara took a deep breath, then spoke in a rush. "Marjorie and Belinda. They're making my life a living hell. Ever since the block party, they've been on a rampage, spreading lies about me and trying to turn Hank against me." I felt a flicker of sympathy for Clara, remembering all too well the pain of being on the receiving end of Marjorie and Belinda's cruelty. But I also couldn't help feeling a sense of vindication, knowing that they were finally getting a taste of their own medicine. "I'm sorry to hear that, Clara," I said carefully. "But what do you expect me to do about it?" Clara leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "I know you have dirt on them, Elena. The things you said at the party about Marjorie betraying her sister. I need you to tell me more. I need leverage to fight back. I sat back in my chair, considering her words. A part of me relished the idea of taking Marjorie and Belinda down a peg, of using their own secrets against them. But another part of me hesitated, knowing that revenge was a slippery slope. "I'll tell you what I know," I said finally. "But on one condition. You use this information to set boundaries and demand respect, not to stoop to their level." Clara nodded eagerly. "Of course, I promise. I just want to be treated fairly, to have a chance at a happy life with Hank." Over the next hour, I told Clara everything I knew about Marjorie's past, about the lies and betrayals that had torn her family apart. I could see the shock and anger on Clara's face as she listened, her hands clenching into fists. When I finished, Clara sat back in her chair, her eyes blazing with determination. "Thank you, Elena," she said softly. "I know this couldn't have been easy for you, dredging up the past like this, but I promise I won't let this information go to waste." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It felt good to finally unburden myself of the secrets I had been carrying for so long, to know that they could be used for good. In the days that followed, I heard whispers of the changes taking place in Hank's family. Clara had confronted Marjorie and Belinda, armed with the truth about their past. She had demanded respect and set clear boundaries, refusing to be bullied or manipulated any longer. And to my surprise, it seemed to be working. Marjorie and Belinda's hold on the family was weakening, their power diminishing with each passing day. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, that the scars of the past could never be fully erased. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. I had taken back control of my life, and in doing so, I had given others the courage to do the same. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. As the months passed, I found myself thriving in my new life. The community center had become a second home to me, a place where I could make a real difference in the lives of others. I had started a support group for women who had gone through difficult life transitions, whether it was divorce, widowhood, or simply the challenges of aging. Every week, we would gather in the cozy meeting room, sharing our stories and offering each other support and encouragement. It was during one of these meetings that I met Sarah, a quiet woman in her late 50s who had recently lost her husband to cancer. She had been struggling to find purpose and meaning in her life, feeling lost and alone in the world. As I listened to her story, I felt a deep sense of connection and empathy. I knew all too well the pain of losing a loved one, of feeling like your entire world had been turned upside down. After the meeting, I approached Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know it feels like everything is falling apart right now," I said softly, "but I promise you, it won't always be this way. You can always reclaim your life, no matter how hard it seems." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "How do you know?" she asked, her voice trembling. I smiled, thinking back on my own journey. "Because I've been where you are. I've felt that same pain, that same sense of hopelessness, but I found a way to keep going, to build a new life for myself. And you can too." Over the next few weeks, I took Sarah under my wing, introducing her to the other volunteers at the community center and helping her find ways to get involved. I watched as she slowly began to come out of her shell, her eyes sparkling with a newfound sense of purpose. One afternoon, as we were sorting through donations together, Sarah turned to me, a smile on her face. "I never thought I'd be able to laugh again," she said. "But being here, with all of you, it's given me a reason to keep going." I felt a surge of pride and happiness, knowing that I had played a small part in Sarah's healing. It was moments like these that made all the struggles and challenges of the past year worth it. As I continued to immerse myself in my community work, I found that my own wounds were slowly beginning to heal as well. The pain of my divorce and the betrayal of my former family would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found a new sense of purpose and identity, one that was rooted in service and compassion. I had surrounded myself with people who lifted me up and supported me, rather than tearing me down. Even my relationship with Clara had begun to evolve. We would never be close friends, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully, united in our determination to set boundaries and demand respect. I knew that Hank was still struggling to come to terms with the changes in his life, but I no longer felt responsible for his happiness. I had learned the hard way that I couldn't control other people's actions or choices, but I could control my own. And so, as I looked out at the smiling faces of the women in my support group, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and contentment. I had come so far from the broken, defeated woman I had been just a year ago. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, and my sense of self-worth. I had found a way to turn my pain into purpose, to use my experiences to help others. And as I stood there, surrounded by the warmth and love of my new community, I knew that I had finally found my place in the world. I was no longer just surviving, but truly thriving. The door slammed behind me with a resounding thud, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Jared, I'm home," I called out, kicking off my shoes and hanging up my coat. No response. Strange, I thought. His car was in the driveway. As I rounded the corner into the living room, the sight before me stopped me dead in my tracks. There on the couch was my husband locked in a passionate embrace with my sister-in-law, Miranda. Time seemed to freeze as a torrent of emotions flooded through me. Shock, betrayal, rage. What the hell is going on here? I shouted, my voice trembling. Jared and Miranda broke apart, their faces flushed with guilt and panic. "Callie, it's not what it looks like," Jared stammered, scrambling to his feet. "Not what it looks like." I spat back, my hands balling into fists. "You were all over my sister, Jared. How could you do this to me?" Miranda stood up, adjusting her disheveled clothing. "Calm down, Callie," she said coolly. "It was just a little harmless fun." The audacity of her words made my blood boil. "Harmless fun? You're supposed to be my family!" "What's all this racket?" Marlene's shrill voice cut through the air as she emerged from the kitchen, her eyes narrowing at the scene before her. "Your son and daughter have been carrying on an affair behind my back," I spat, glaring at the two of them. Marlene scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. This family doesn't need your overreactions." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother-in-law was defending their betrayal. "Are you serious right now, Marlene? How can you be okay with this?" "Enough," Jared shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Callie. It was just a stupid mistake." "A mistake?" The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked around at the three of them, my so-called family, and felt a profound sense of isolation wash over me. In that moment, I realized that, no matter what I said or did, they would never take my side. I was alone in this. Tears stung my eyes as I fought to maintain my composure. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and determination. "I'm done with all of you and your lies." Without another word, I turned and stormed out of the living room, grabbing my coat and keys on the way out. As I flung open the front door, I heard Marlene's voice call out behind me. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back." But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us. I had finally seen them for who they truly were, and there was no going back. I slammed the car door shut and peeled out of the driveway, tears streaming down my face. How could this be happening? Just a few years ago, Jared and I were so happy, so in love. We had dreams of starting a family, growing old together in a little house with a white picket fence. That future now seemed like a cruel mirage. I thought back to the day we first met at the hospital cafeteria. I was a young nurse, and he was a charming medical student doing his rounds. He flashed that dazzling smile and struck up a conversation, and I was instantly smitten. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared passion for helping others and our desire for a simple, peaceful life together. Those early years were blissful. Jared was attentive, caring, and always put me first. But as time went on, cracks began to show. His spending habits spiraled out of control, and he racked up debt faster than I could keep track of. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always brushed it off, promising he had it under control. Then there was Miranda. From the moment I met her, I sensed something off about her. She was always a little too friendly with Jared, a little too touchy-feely, but I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. When Jared suggested we move in with his mother to ease our financial burden, I was hesitant, but he assured me it would only be temporary, and I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a web of lies and manipulation. Marlene's house was like a prison, with unspoken rules and a suffocating atmosphere of hostility. She and Miranda treated me like an outsider, constantly belittling me and undermining my authority. Jared, spineless as ever, did nothing to defend me, too busy seeking his mother's approval. While I worked long shifts at the hospital, trying to keep us afloat, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, disrupting my routine and making it impossible for me to find any sense of peace or order. And Jared? He was too busy burying his head in the sand, ignoring the mounting tensions and the growing rift in our marriage. I tried to talk to him to make him see what was happening, but he refused to listen. He was so desperate for his mother's love and approval that he was willing to sacrifice our relationship for it. As I drove aimlessly through the night, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, they all swirled together in a toxic cocktail. But beneath it all, I felt a glimmer of something else. Determination. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I wouldn't let them break me. I was stronger than that, stronger than they could ever imagine. After that fateful night, I found myself thrust into a new reality, one where the walls of Marlene's house felt like they were closing in on me. The air was thick with unspoken rules and covert hostility, and I struggled to find my footing in this oppressive atmosphere. Marlene and Miranda made it clear from the start that I was an outsider in their domain. They would exchange pointed looks and whispered comments whenever I entered a room, their eyes boring into me with a mixture of disdain and contempt. "Honestly, Callie, must you leave such a mess everywhere you go?" Marlene would sneer, gesturing to the perfectly tidy living room. Miranda would chime in with a smirk. "I don't know how you manage to make such a pigsty out of everything." Their words were like daggers, chipping away at my self-worth bit by bit. And Jared? He remained silent, too spineless to stand up for me against his mother's constant belittling. While I worked long, grueling shifts at the hospital, trying to make ends meet, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, leaving messes for me to clean up when I returned home, exhausted and drained. "Callie, darling, you really should learn to keep a tighter ship around here," Marlene would tut, her eyes glinting with malice. It was a twisted game of control, and they were determined to make me the loser. Jared's dependency on his mother's approval became more apparent with each passing day. He would cower and capitulate to her every whim, too afraid to risk her disapproval. Our marriage, once a source of joy and strength, had become a battleground, and I was fighting a losing war. "Jared, please, can't you see what they're doing?" I pleaded with him one night, tears streaming down my face. "They're tearing us apart, piece by piece." But he just shook his head, his eyes downcast. "You're overreacting, Callie. They're family. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. Hadn't they already shattered that sacred bond with their betrayal? As the days turned into weeks, the weight of their constant belittling and manipulation began to take its toll. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into the sanctuary of my work, where at least I could find a brief respite from the chaos. It was there, in the halls of the hospital, that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. As the weeks dragged on, Marlene and Miranda's manipulative games intensified. It was as if they took perverse pleasure in tightening their control over me, squeezing the last vestiges of self-worth from my soul. "Callie, darling, did you really think that outfit was appropriate for work?" Marlene would sneer, her eyes raking over me with disdain. "You're a nurse, not a streetwalker." Miranda would chime in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, leave something to the imagination, won't you?" Their words were like knives, cutting deep into my already fragile psyche. I would retreat into myself, trying to tune out their constant barrage of insults and belittling comments. But it wasn't just their words that tormented me. Miranda took a particular delight in disrupting my work life, creating chaos and disarray at home that would bleed into my professional responsibilities. She would deliberately leave messes around the house, knowing I would have to rush to clean them up before my shift. Or she would accidentally misplace my scrubs or work bag, forcing me to scramble to find them before I was late. "Oops, sorry, Callie," she would say with a sickly sweet smile. "I must have misplaced your things again. You really should be more organized." It was a twisted game, and I was the unwitting pawn. Through it all, Jared remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. "Jared, please," I would beg him, tears streaming down my face. "Can't you see what they're doing to me? To us?" But he would just shake his head, his eyes downcast. "They're family, Callie. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. It was during those dark days that I found solace in my work at the hospital. There, I could escape the suffocating atmosphere of Marlene's house and find a brief respite from the constant barrage of abuse. And it was there that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship almost immediately, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. With Lucas's encouragement, I started to stand up for myself, pushing back against Marlene and Miranda's constant barrage of insults and mind games. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "You know what, Marlene?" I said one day, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done letting you and Miranda treat me like garbage. I deserve better than this." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me, but before she could respond, I turned and walked away, my head held high. It was a small victory, but it was the first step on a long road to reclaiming my self-worth and my life. As the weeks passed, the tension in the house grew thicker, like a suffocating blanket weighing down on me. Marlene and Miranda's barbs became sharper, their insults more cutting, as if they could sense my newfound defiance and were determined to snuff it out. "Look at you, Callie, acting all high and mighty," Marlene sneered one evening as I returned from a long shift at the hospital. "Don't forget your place in this household." Miranda chimed in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, you're nothing but a burden to us all. You should be grateful we even let you stay here." Their words stung, but I refused to let them see how much they affected me. I held my head high and walked past them, my jaw clenched in determination. But Jared, as always, remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. As Marlene and Miranda launched into yet another tirade, berating me for some perceived slight, something inside me snapped. "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my fist down on the kitchen table. "I'm done with this constant abuse, this never-ending barrage of insults and belittling." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own house?" she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "Your house?" I spat back, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and newfound courage. "This was supposed to be my home too, Marlene, but you and Miranda have made it a living hell for me." Miranda scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. We're just trying to help you fit in with this family." "Fit in?" I laughed bitterly. "You've made it abundantly clear that I'll never be a part of this family. Not really." Jared, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. "Callie, please, let's not make a scene." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing with fury. "A scene? Is that all you care about, Jared? Keeping up appearances while your own family tears me apart?" He flinched, shrinking back from the intensity of my gaze. I just think we should all try to get along," he mumbled weakly. "Get along?" I shook my head in disbelief. "How can I get along with people who have made it their mission to destroy me? To strip away every last shred of my self-worth and dignity?" Marlene stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, young lady. You're the one who's brought nothing but drama and chaos into this family." "Drama and chaos?" I laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from the woman who's been orchestrating this whole twisted game from the start." Miranda sneered. "Game? Don't flatter yourself, Callie. You're not worth the effort." That was the final straw. I felt something inside me snap, a dam of pent-up frustration and anger finally bursting forth. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done with all of you and your lies, your manipulation, your constant need to tear me down." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting such defiance from me. "You ungrateful little—" But I didn't let her finish. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the kitchen, heading straight for the bedroom to pack my bags. "Callie, wait!" Jared called out, trailing behind me. "Where are you going?" I whirled around to face him, my eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. "I'm leaving, Jared. I'm leaving this toxic household, and I'm leaving you." His face fell, a flicker of fear passing over his features. But where will you go?" I shook my head, a sad smile tugging at my lips. "Anywhere but here. Anywhere I can finally be free of this constant abuse, this never-ending cycle of manipulation and control." As I stuffed the last of my belongings into my suitcase, I heard Marlene's shrill voice echoing down the hallway. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back, crawling and begging for our forgiveness." But as I stepped out into the cool night air, suitcase in hand, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us, the final chapter in a story of betrayal and broken trust. I glanced back one last time at the house that had once been my home, a sense of finality settling over me. "You won't break me," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret losing me." And with that, I turned and walked away, my head held high, and my heart filled with a newfound sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The night I left Marlene's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, sadness, but also a profound sense of relief. As I drove away, the weight of years of emotional abuse and manipulation seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound determination to take control of my life. In the days that followed, I found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the oppressive atmosphere of my former home. It was small and sparsely furnished, but to me it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of judgment and criticism bearing down on me. As I settled into my new life, I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding solace in the familiar routine and the knowledge that I was making a difference in people's lives. It was there that I reconnected with Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose support had been a lifeline during my darkest days. We would often grab coffee together during our breaks, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else. He listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding that helped to heal the deep emotional wounds left by my failed marriage and the betrayal of my own family. "You're so strong, Callie," he would say, his eyes filled with a warmth and sincerity that I had almost forgotten existed. "What you've been through would have broken most people, but you've come out the other side, even more resilient." His words resonated deeply within me, reminding me of the inner strength that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been beaten down, but I refused to be broken. With Lucas's support, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. My love of reading, my passion for gardening, my appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had been neglected during the tumultuous years of my marriage. Slowly but surely, I felt myself coming back to life, like a flower blooming after a long, harsh winter. In my quieter moments, I would reflect on the emotional scars left by my ordeal, the deep cuts inflicted by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me. But instead of wallowing in bitterness and resentment, I found solace in my own resilience, in the knowledge that I had emerged from that darkness stronger and more self-assured than ever before. "You know, Lucas," I said to him one day as we sat sipping our coffee in the hospital cafeteria, "I used to think that my life was defined by the people around me, my husband, my in-laws, the roles I played for them. But now I realize that my life is my own, and I'm the one who gets to write my story." He smiled, reaching across the table to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "And what a beautiful story it's going to be, Callie. You've already overcome so much, and the best is yet to come." As I looked into his kind eyes, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in far too long. It was the promise of new beginnings, of a future filled with possibility and hope. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace, secure in the knowledge that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength and resilience to face them head-on. The road to empowerment had been long and arduous, but I had emerged on the other side, stronger and more self-assured than ever before. It had been several months since I had walked out of Marlene's house, leaving behind the toxic web of lies and manipulation that had nearly broken me. In that time, I had worked hard to rebuild my life, embracing my newfound independence and rediscovering the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. So when my phone rang one afternoon and I saw Marlene's name flashing across the screen, I felt a surge of anger and resentment. How dare she try to worm her way back into my life after everything she had put me through? "What do you want, Marlene?" I answered, my voice clipped and cold. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she was taken aback by my icy tone. "Callie, dear, is that any way to speak to your mother-in-law?" I scoffed. "You lost the right to call yourself that the moment you betrayed me and took their side." Another pause, then a heavy sigh. "Callie, I need your help." Those words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was tempted to simply hang up the phone and be done with it. But a part of me, the part that still clung to the naive hope that she might actually show some remorse, made me hesitate. "What could you possibly need my help with?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. It's Jared and Miranda," she said, her voice trembling. "They've made a mess of things, and now we're in real trouble." I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the admission, but I pushed it aside. "And why should I care about your problems, Marlene? After the way you all treated me, why would I lift a finger to help you?" "Please, Callie," she pleaded, her usual haughty demeanor crumbling. "We're in over our heads here. Jared's financial mistakes, Miranda's reckless spending, it's all caught up to us, and we're drowning." I could hear the desperation in her voice, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and measured. "You're calling me, the same woman you belittled and abused for years, begging for help to clean up the mess you and your precious children have made." Silence on the other end of the line. "Well, let me tell you something, Marlene," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "You had your chance to treat me with respect, to stand by me as family should, but instead you chose to tear me down, to make me feel worthless and alone." I could hear her shallow breathing, but she didn't interrupt. "So you know what? You can take your problems and your pleas for help, and you can shove them. I'm done being your scapegoat, your punching bag. You made your bed, Marlene, and now you can lie in it." With that, I hung up the phone, a triumphant smile spreading across my face. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to Marlene and her manipulative games, and it felt incredible. As I basked in the afterglow of my newfound power, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The toxic ties that had once bound me to that family were finally severed, and I was free to move forward with my life, unburdened by their drama and dysfunction. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, I sat down and penned a heartfelt letter to Lucas, the man whose kindness and support had been a guiding light during my darkest days. I poured out my gratitude, thanking him for helping me find the strength to break free from the chains of my past and embrace the future with open arms. And as I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement at the thought of what that future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, ready to embark on a new chapter, filled with possibility and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before, a true survivor who had faced down her demons and emerged victorious. In the months that followed my decisive break from Marlene and her toxic family, my life blossomed in ways I had never imagined possible. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, freeing me to embrace the world with open arms and an open heart. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding immense fulfillment in the simple act of caring for others. My colleagues remarked on the newfound confidence and radiance that seemed to emanate from me, a stark contrast to the broken, defeated woman I had been just a few months prior. As my self-assurance grew, I found myself becoming a mentor of sorts to the younger nurses on the floor. They would seek me out, drawn to the aura of resilience and strength that surrounded me, eager to learn from my experiences and the hard-won wisdom I had gained. "How did you find the courage to walk away from such a toxic situation?" one young nurse asked me one day, her eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. I smiled, reaching out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. It wasn't easy, believe me. There were moments when I thought the weight of it all would crush me. But deep down, I knew that I deserved better, that we all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what. She nodded, hanging on my every word as I recounted the harrowing journey that had led me to this point, the betrayal, the emotional abuse, the ultimate decision to break free and reclaim my life. "You're so strong, Callie," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "I hope I can be half as brave as you someday." In those moments, I felt a profound sense of purpose wash over me. My story, the tale of my resilience in the face of adversity, had the power to inspire and empower others. It was a legacy far greater than I could have ever imagined. Outside of work, my life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had fallen by the wayside during the tumultuous years of my marriage. We would gather for dinners and movie nights, laughing and reminiscing about the carefree days of our youth. And then there was Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose unwavering support had been a guiding light during my darkest hours. Our friendship deepened, evolving into something more, a connection that transcended mere words, a bond forged in the fires of shared struggle and mutual understanding. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up to him in ways I never thought possible, sharing the deepest corners of my heart and soul. And in his warm embrace, I found a sense of peace and acceptance that had eluded me for far too long. On quiet evenings, when the city was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I would gaze out over the skyline from the comfort of my modest apartment, marveling at the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, paved with heartbreak and betrayal, but I had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. In those moments of quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the trials that had tested my mettle, for the people who had lifted me up when I could no longer stand on my own, and for the indomitable spirit that had carried me through it all. As the city lights twinkled like a million tiny stars, I smiled to myself, secure in the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was equipped to face them head-on. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of strength and resilience for all those who dared to dream of a better life. And as I gazed out over the vast expanse of possibility that stretched before me, I knew that the best was yet to come. The drawer creaked as I pulled it open, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I shouldn't be snooping through Leonard's things, but something had been off lately. His distant behavior, the hushed phone calls, the late nights at the office. I needed answers. My fingers brushed against a stack of papers, and I pulled them out. A letter addressed to Leonard caught my eye. I unfolded it with trembling hands, my eyes scanning the words, my breath caught in my throat as the truth unraveled before me. Leonard had a hidden life, a secret that shattered the very foundation of our 20-year marriage. "What the hell are you doing?" Leonard's voice boomed from behind me, causing me to jump. I spun around, the letter still clutched in my hand. "How dare you snoop through my things?" he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "If you step out of line, I'll make sure you lose everything." I stumbled back, my heart racing. "Leonard, what is this? Who is this woman?" He snatched the letter from my hand, his eyes blazing. "It's none of your damn business, Carolyn. You have no right to question me." Tears stung my eyes as I watched him storm out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sank onto the bed, my world crumbling around me. How could this be happening? We had just retired, ready to enjoy our golden years together. I had been so excited to become a grandmother, to spend more time with our family. But now everything felt like a lie. Leonard's distant behavior, his mother Evelyn's constant criticism of my homemaking and child-rearing abilities. It all made sense now. They had been hiding something from me, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I wiped my tears away, a newfound determination rising within me. I couldn't let them control me any longer. I had to fight for my family, for the future I had always dreamed of. The next morning, Evelyn arrived for her daily visit, her sharp eyes scanning the house for any imperfections. "Carolyn, dear, you really should dust more often," she tutted, running a finger along the mantelpiece. "And what's this I hear about Leonard being upset with you?" I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. "Evelyn, I appreciate your concern, but this is between me and Leonard." She scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "You forget your place, Carolyn. Leonard is my son, and I will always stand by him. If you can't fulfill your duties as a wife, then perhaps you don't deserve to be part of this family." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. I had spent too many years bowing to her every whim, trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, but no more. "I think it's time for you to leave, Evelyn," I said firmly, holding the door open for her. "I have a lot to think about, and I need some space." She huffed, grabbing her purse and storming out of the house. I closed the door behind her, leaning against it for support. I knew I had a long road ahead of me, but I was ready to fight for what was right. As I stood there, my mind racing with possibilities, I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find Thomas, Leonard's father, standing on the porch. He gave me a sympathetic smile, his eyes filled with understanding. "Carolyn, I couldn't help but overhear what happened with Evelyn," he said gently. "I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. You don't have to go through this alone." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and I stepped aside to let him in. Perhaps I had found an unexpected ally in this battle, someone who could help me navigate the treacherous waters ahead. The days following my discovery of Leonard's secret were a blur of emotions. I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, wondering what other lies he had been hiding from me. But I couldn't let my guard down, not with Evelyn's daily visits and her constant criticism. "Carolyn, dear, you really should dust more often," she said, running her finger along the mantelpiece. "And what's this I hear about Leonard being upset with you?" I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. "Evelyn, I appreciate your concern, but this is between me and Leonard." She scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "You forget your place, Carolyn. Leonard is my son, and I will always stand by him. If you can't fulfill your duties as a wife, then perhaps you don't deserve to be part of this family." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. I had spent too many years bowing to her every whim, trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, but no more. "I think it's time for you to leave, Evelyn," I said firmly, holding the door open for her. "I have a lot to think about, and I need some space." She huffed, grabbing her purse and storming out of the house. I closed the door behind her, leaning against it for support. I knew I had a long road ahead of me, but I was ready to fight for what was right. That night, Leonard came home late as usual. I was waiting for him in the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to confront him about the letter, but I was terrified of what he might say. "Leonard, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. He looked at me, his eyes cold and distant. "What is it now, Carolyn? I've had a long day, and I don't have time for your nonsense." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I found the letter, Leonard. I know about your secret life, about the other woman." His face contorted with rage, and he slammed his fist on the table. "How dare you accuse me of such things? I've given you everything, Carolyn. A home, a family, a life of comfort, and this is how you repay me? By snooping through my things and making wild accusations?" I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated by his anger. "I'm not making accusations, Leonard. I saw the letter with my own eyes. I know the truth." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. "The truth? You wouldn't know the truth if it slapped you in the face, Carolyn. You're just a naive little housewife who's in way over her head." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, determined not to let him see me cry. "I may be a housewife, Leonard, but I'm not naive. I know what I saw, and I won't let you gaslight me into believing otherwise." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "Listen carefully, Carolyn. If you breathe a word of this to anyone, I'll make sure you lose everything. The house, the money, the family. I'll take it all away from you, and you'll be left with nothing. Do you understand?" I nodded, my heart sinking in my chest. I knew he meant every word, and I couldn't risk losing everything I had worked so hard for. But I also knew that I couldn't live like this anymore, trapped in a marriage built on lies and deceit. As Leonard stormed out of the room, I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of his threats and Evelyn's constant criticism. I needed to find a way out, a way to break free from this toxic cycle. But how could I do that when everyone seemed to be against me? When my own husband and mother-in-law were determined to keep me in my place, to make me feel small and insignificant? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I had to keep fighting. For myself, for my family, for the life I deserved. And I wouldn't stop until I found a way to make that happen. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, the weight of Leonard's threats still lingering in my mind. I knew I couldn't face another day of Evelyn's criticism and Leonard's cold indifference, so I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I stepped outside, I noticed Thomas, Leonard's father, tending to the garden. He looked up and smiled, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good morning, Carolyn. How are you holding up?" I hesitated, not wanting to burden him with my troubles, but something about his gentle demeanor made me feel safe. "I've been better, Thomas. It's been a tough few days." He nodded, setting down his gardening tools and gesturing for me to sit beside him on the bench. "I can only imagine. I've seen the strain you've been under, and I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Tears welled up in my eyes at his words, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you, Thomas. That means more to me than you know." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the birds flit from tree to tree. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice soft and contemplative. "You know, Carolyn, I've been married to Evelyn for over 50 years, and it hasn't always been easy. She can be a handful, to say the least." I couldn't help but chuckle at his understatement. "That's putting it mildly." He smiled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "I know, but I've learned a thing or two about dealing with her over the years. The key is to stand your ground, to not let her push you around. She may be stubborn, but so are you." I nodded, feeling a newfound sense of strength and determination. "You're right, Thomas. I can't let her control me anymore. I need to fight for what I believe in, for what I know is right." He patted my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "And I'll be right there beside you every step of the way. You're not alone in this, Carolyn." We spent the rest of the morning together, talking and laughing as Thomas shared stories of his own tumultuous past with Evelyn. It was a side of him I had never seen before, and I found myself growing more and more fond of him with each passing minute. As the sun began to climb higher in the sky, Thomas stood up, stretching his arms above his head. Well, I suppose I should get back to my gardening. These flowers won't plant themselves. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. Thank you, Thomas, for everything. He winked, his smile warm and genuine. Anytime, Carolyn, and remember, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. With that, he picked up his tools and set to work, whistling a cheerful tune as he went. I watched him for a moment, feeling a sense of gratitude and affection wash over me. In the midst of all the chaos and heartbreak, I had found an unexpected ally, a friend who believed in me and supported me unconditionally. But as I turned to head back inside, I saw Evelyn standing in the doorway. Her eyes narrowed and her lips pursed. "What were you doing out there with Thomas?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. I felt my newfound confidence waver for a moment, but then I remembered Thomas's words. I couldn't let her push me around anymore. I had to stand my ground. "We were just talking, Evelyn. There's no need to get upset," she scoffed, her face twisting into a scowl. "Talking? More like conspiring against me, I'm sure. You've always been jealous of my relationship with Thomas, haven't you?" I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger and frustration rise up within me. "That's not true, Evelyn. I have no reason to be jealous of you. I'm just trying to find some peace and support during a difficult time, and Thomas has been kind enough to offer that to me." She opened her mouth to retort, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. "I'm done listening to your accusations and criticisms, Evelyn. From now on, I'm going to do what's best for me and my family, whether you like it or not." With that, I brushed past her and headed inside, my heart racing, but my head held high. I knew there would be more battles to come, but for now, I had won a small victory. And with Thomas by my side, I felt like I could face anything. The confrontation with Evelyn left me shaken, but I refused to let it dampen my spirits. I had Thomas's support, and that was enough to keep me going. I spent the next few days focusing on my own well-being, taking long walks in the park and reading my favorite books, but my newfound peace was short-lived. One afternoon, while cleaning out Leonard's study, I stumbled upon an envelope hidden in the back of his desk drawer. My heart raced as I pulled it out, my hands trembling with anticipation. Inside, I found a stack of photographs and letters. The photos showed Leonard with a younger woman, their arms wrapped around each other, their faces beaming with happiness. The letters were even more damning, revealing a long-term affair that had been going on for years. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. How could Leonard do this to me, to our family? I had given him everything, sacrificed my own dreams and desires to be the perfect wife and mother. And this was how he repaid me? I confronted Leonard that night, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "How could you do this, Leonard? How could you throw away everything we've built together for some cheap fling?" He looked at me with cold, unfeeling eyes. "You're one to talk, Carolyn. You haven't been fulfilling your wifely duties for years. What did you expect me to do, just sit around and wait for you to come to your senses?" I recoiled as if he had slapped me. "Wifely duties? Is that all I am to you, Leonard? A servant, a plaything to be used and discarded at your whim?" He sneered, his face twisting with contempt. "You're lucky I've put up with you for this long, Carolyn. Most men would have left you years ago." I felt a surge of rage course through my veins. "Get out, Leonard. Get out of my house, and don't come back." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. "Your house? You forget, Carolyn. Everything here belongs to me. The house, the money, the family. Without me, you're nothing." I stood my ground, my voice steady and resolute. "I may be nothing to you, Leonard, but I'm everything to our children and grandchildren, and I won't let you destroy this family any longer." He grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking with sobs. How had it come to this? How had the man I once loved turned into such a monster? I spent the next few hours going through the letters and photographs, my heart breaking with each new revelation. Leonard had been carrying on this affair for years, sneaking off to meet his mistress whenever he had the chance. He had even bought her expensive gifts and taken her on lavish vacations, all while I was at home, struggling to keep our family together. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know where to turn. Evelyn would never believe me, and Leonard had made it clear that he would stop at nothing to keep his secrets hidden. As I sat there, lost in thought, the phone rang. It was Thomas, his voice filled with concern. "Carolyn, are you all right? I heard shouting coming from your house earlier." I broke down, pouring out the whole sordid story. Thomas listened patiently, his voice calm and reassuring. "Carolyn, you need to get out of there. Come stay with me for a while until we can figure out what to do next." I hesitated, not wanting to impose on him, but the thought of staying in that house, with all its painful memories and secrets, was too much to bear. "Thank you, Thomas. I'll be over in a few minutes." I packed a small bag and headed out the door, my heart heavy but my mind clear. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but with Thomas by my side, I felt like I could face anything. And I was determined to make Leonard pay for what he had done, no matter what it took. Staying with Thomas was a breath of fresh air. His home was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive atmosphere I had grown accustomed to. Thomas was a gracious host, always making sure I had everything I needed and offering a listening ear whenever I needed to talk. Over the next few days, I gathered all the evidence I had of Leonard's affair, including the photographs and letters I had found. I reached out to friends and family, telling them the truth about what had been going on behind closed doors. To my surprise, many of them had suspected something was amiss for years, but had been too afraid to say anything. With their support and encouragement, I made the difficult decision to leave Leonard for good. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't continue to live a lie. I had to do what was best for myself and my family. I called my sister Diane, who lived nearby, and asked if I could stay with her for a while. She didn't hesitate for a second, insisting that I come over right away. "Bring Oliver too," she said. "He needs his grandmother now more than ever." I packed a few bags and picked up Oliver from school, my heart heavy but my mind clear. As we drove to Diane's house, I explained to Oliver that we would be staying with Aunt Diane for a while, until things settled down at home. He seemed confused but didn't ask too many questions, for which I was grateful. Diane welcomed us with open arms, her house a haven of peace and tranquility. She had always been the level-headed one in the family, the one who could see things clearly and offer practical advice. I knew I could count on her to help me through this difficult time. A few days later, I invited Leonard and Evelyn over to Diane's house, along with a few other close family members. I had something important to tell them, and I wanted to do it in person. When they arrived, Leonard looked annoyed and impatient, while Evelyn seemed suspicious and on edge. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice steady and clear. "I know about the affair, Leonard," I said, holding up the photographs and letters. "I know about Anne, and I know how long this has been going on." Leonard's face turned white, while Evelyn gasped in shock. "What are you talking about, Carolyn?" she demanded. "This is absurd." I shook my head, my eyes never leaving Leonard's face. "It's the truth, Evelyn, and I have proof. Leonard has been lying to us for years, and I won't stand for it any longer." Leonard's face contorted with rage, and he lunged towards me, his hands outstretched. "You stupid, ungrateful bitch!" he snarled. "How dare you do this to me, after everything I've done for you?" But before he could reach me, Thomas stepped in front of him, his eyes blazing with anger. "That's enough, Leonard," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will not lay a hand on Carolyn, not now, not ever." Leonard stepped back, his face twisted with hatred and disgust. "You're all against me," he spat. "My own family, turning on me like a pack of wolves." I stood my ground, my head held high. "We're not against you, Leonard. We're against the lies and the deceit. We're against the way you've treated me and this family for years, and we won't stand for it any longer." Evelyn looked stunned, her eyes darting back and forth between Leonard and me. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the realization that perhaps her precious son wasn't as perfect as she had always believed. "I'm leaving, Leonard," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "I'm taking Oliver, and we're starting a new life, away from you and your toxic behavior, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, my head held high, and my heart filled with a newfound sense of strength and determination. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive and in control of my own destiny. News of my confrontation with Leonard and Evelyn spread like wildfire through our small town. Everywhere I went, I could feel the eyes of the community on me, some filled with pity, others with a newfound respect. It was as if they had always known that something was amiss in our family, but had been too polite to say anything. Leonard, on the other hand, was facing a very different kind of attention. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and he was met with cold stares and turned backs at every turn. His once thriving business began to suffer as clients pulled away, unwilling to be associated with a man who had betrayed his wife so publicly. I watched from a distance as Leonard struggled to maintain his composure, his carefully crafted facade crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction in seeing him suffer, but another part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. After all, he was still the father of my children, and I had once loved him deeply. Evelyn, surprisingly, took a different approach. She began to reach out to me, inviting me to tea and offering to help with Oliver. At first, I was suspicious of her motives, wondering if she was simply trying to save face in the wake of the scandal. But as time went on, I began to see a different side of her, one that was more vulnerable and genuine than I had ever seen before. "Carolyn, I know I haven't always been the easiest person to get along with," she said one afternoon as we sat in her living room. "But I want you to know that I deeply regret the way I've treated you over the years. I was so focused on protecting Leonard that I failed to see the pain he was causing you." I was taken aback by her words, unsure of how to respond. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said finally. "That means a lot to me." She reached out and took my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be there for you and Oliver in any way I can. Please, let me help you." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. As the weeks went by, I found myself growing stronger and more independent. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping other women who had been through similar experiences. It was a way for me to give back to the community that had supported me through my darkest times, and it gave me a sense of purpose that I had been missing for so long. One day, as I was leaving the shelter, I ran into Anne, Leonard's former mistress. She looked tired and worn, her eyes filled with a deep sadness that I recognized all too well. "Carolyn, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you or your family. I didn't know Leonard was married when we first started seeing each other, and by the time I found out, it was too late." I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of kinship. We were both victims of Leonard's lies and deceit, and we had both suffered greatly because of it. "I forgive you, Anne," I said, my voice steady and clear. "We were both fooled by Leonard, and we both deserve better than what he gave us." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Carolyn. That means more to me than you know." As I walked away, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had faced my demons and come out stronger on the other side. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them head-on, with the support of my family and friends by my side. And as for Leonard, well, he would have to face the consequences of his actions, just as I had. But for now, I was focused on building a new life for myself and Oliver, one that was filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. Just when I thought I had uncovered all the secrets in my family, Thomas dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. We were sitting in his living room, enjoying a quiet cup of tea, when he suddenly cleared his throat and looked at me with a serious expression. "Carolyn, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "It's about Evelyn, and why she's been so hard on you all these years." I set my cup down, my heart racing with anticipation. "What is it, Thomas? What do you know?" He sighed, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Many years ago, when Leonard was just a boy, Evelyn had an affair. It nearly destroyed our marriage, and it's haunted her ever since." I gasped, my mind spinning with the implications of his words. Evelyn, the woman who had always been so quick to judge me, had been hiding her own infidelity all along. "She's been projecting her own guilt onto you, Carolyn," Thomas continued. "She sees herself in you, and it terrifies her. That's why she's been so overbearing, so critical of your every move." I sat back in my chair, stunned by the revelation. Suddenly, everything made sense. Evelyn's constant meddling, her unwavering support of Leonard, even in the face of his own betrayal. She had been trying to atone for her own sins, and I had been caught in the crossfire. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront Evelyn, to force her to face the truth about herself and the damage she had caused. I thanked Thomas for his honesty and set off for Evelyn's house, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. When I arrived, Evelyn was sitting in her living room, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up at me, her face etched with guilt and shame. "I know why you're here, Carolyn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas told you about my affair, didn't he?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "Why, Evelyn? Why did you do it? And why did you take it out on me all these years?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I was young and foolish, Carolyn. I made a mistake, and I've been paying for it ever since. When I saw you so happy and in love with Leonard, it reminded me of everything I had lost." I couldn't bear it. I felt a wave of empathy wash over me, mixed with a deep sense of anger and betrayal. "But why protect Leonard, Evelyn? Why enable his own infidelity when you knew firsthand how much it could hurt?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for forgiveness. "I thought I was doing the right thing, Carolyn. I thought I was protecting my family, just like I had tried to do all those years ago. But I see now that I was wrong. I was only hurting you and myself in the process." I sat down beside her, my heart heavy with the weight of her confession. "I forgive you, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to be honest with yourself and with our family. No more secrets, no more lies. We deserve better than that." She nodded, her face a mask of relief and gratitude. "I promise, Carolyn. From now on, I'll do everything in my power to make things right, starting with being there for you and Oliver, in whatever way you need me." I hugged her then, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. The secrets that had haunted our family for so long were finally out in the open, and we could begin to heal. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew that with the support of my loved ones, I could face anything. As I left Evelyn's house that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. I had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, I had taken back control of my own life. And I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with my head held high and my heart full of hope for the future. In the weeks following my confrontation with Evelyn, I watched as Leonard's world crumbled around him. His once thriving business had all but collapsed, and his reputation in the community was in tatters. Everywhere he went, he was met with cold stares and whispered accusations, the weight of his actions finally catching up to him. I knew I should have felt a sense of satisfaction, seeing him suffer the consequences of his betrayal, but instead I felt a deep sense of sadness and regret. Despite everything he had done, Leonard was still the father of my children, and a part of me would always love him. One evening, as I sat in Diane's living room, watching Oliver play with his toys, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Leonard standing there, his face haggard and his eyes filled with despair. "Carolyn, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing him to enter. We sat down at the kitchen table, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. "I'm leaving town," Leonard said finally, his eyes fixed on the table. "I've lost everything, my business, my reputation, my family. There's nothing left for me here." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness wash over me. "I understand, Leonard. I think it's for the best." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a deep regret. "I'm sorry, Carolyn, for everything. I know I can never make it right, but I want you to know that I truly am sorry." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back, determined to stay strong. "I know, Leonard, but sometimes sorry isn't enough." He nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I know. I just hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." With that, he stood up and walked out the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I knew that forgiveness would come in time, but for now, I had to focus on rebuilding my life and creating a better future for myself and Oliver. A few days later, I found the perfect little cottage just a few blocks away from Diane's house. It was small and cozy, with a little garden out back where Oliver could play. As I signed the lease and started packing up my things, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation wash over me. This was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh and create the life I had always dreamed of. Evelyn and Thomas were there to help me move in, their faces filled with a newfound warmth and affection. Evelyn had been true to her word, making a genuine effort to be more supportive and understanding. She even offered to watch Oliver while I unpacked, giving me a much-needed break. As I sat in my new living room, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had been through so much in the past few months. The betrayal, the anger, the pain. But I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But I also knew that I had the love and support of my family and the strength within myself to overcome anything that came my way. As the sun began to set outside my window, casting a warm glow over the room, I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in years. This was my new beginning, my chance to create the life I had always wanted, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. The letter fluttered to the floor, the words searing into my mind like a branding iron. "Lydia, you have a sister." My mother-in-law's voice echoed hollowly as I stared at her in disbelief. Robert shifted uncomfortably beside me on the plush sofa. "Greta, what are you talking about?" She clasped her hands, her eyes downcast. "I should have told you both sooner. Years ago, before we met, Robert." She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavily in the air. A sick feeling twisted in my gut as the truth dawned on me. Robert had a child from another relationship, a daughter he had never mentioned, a secret buried so deep that even I was oblivious. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a potent mix of shock and betrayal. Robert's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Her name is Emma. She's 16 now. 16 years old." The realization slammed into me like a freight train. This girl had existed all this time, mere miles away from us, and we knew nothing about her. Greta reached out, her papery skin brushing my arm. "I'm sorry, dear. We wanted to protect you from—" I jerked away from her touch, anger flaring hot. "Protect me? By lying all these years?" Robert ran a hand through his tousled brown hair, agitation etched into his features. "Lydia, please." "Let me explain." But I had heard enough. Snatching my purse from the side table, I stormed out of the living room and into the hallway, the plush carpet muffling my hurried footsteps. "Lydia, wait!" Robert called after me, but I kept moving, yanking open the front door and bursting out onto the sun-drenched porch. The peaceful tree-lined street mocked me with its tranquility as I paced back and forth, drawing in deep, shuddering breaths. How could he have done this? After everything we'd been through together, building our life, our family. The crunch of gravel underfoot made me spin around. Robert stood at the edge of the driveway, hands shoved into his pockets, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Talk to me," he pleaded, his hazel eyes boring into mine. "Don't shut me out. Not now." I opened my mouth, a torrent of recriminations ready to spill forth, but then I caught a glimpse of the diamond solitaire on my left hand, sparkling in the sunlight. A reminder of the vows we had made, the life we had promised to share. Drawing a steadying breath, I met his gaze levelly. "Then you'd better start explaining. All of it, Robert. No more lies, no more secrets. I deserve to know the truth." His shoulders sagged, and he nodded slowly. "You're right. You do. I'll tell you everything, Lydia. I swear it." As I stood there, rooted on that very porch where we had welcomed our firstborn son into the world, I could feel the landscape of our lives shifting irrevocably. The solid ground was crumbling beneath my feet, and I had no choice but to wade into the unknown, seeking answers and bracing for the impact of long-buried secrets. The moving truck rumbled up the driveway, its bulky form casting a long shadow across the freshly paved asphalt. I watched from the living room window as the burly movers unloaded box after box, their grunts carrying through the glass pane. "Are you sure about this, Greta?" I asked, turning to face my mother-in-law. She stood in the middle of the room, surveying the space with a critical eye. "Of course, dear." She patted my arm in a placating gesture. "With Emma coming to live with us, you'll need all the help you can get." My jaw clenched at her condescending tone, as if I couldn't handle my own family affairs without her interference. The front door swung open, and Robert stepped inside, his brow furrowed. The movers are just about finished unloading Greta's things. Excellent, Greta declared, clasping her hands together. Now, where should we set up my bedroom? I opened my mouth to protest, but Robert cut me off with a pleading look. Mom, are you sure you don't want to reconsider staying in your own place? We've got plenty of room here, but— Nonsense, Greta scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. I'm not getting any younger, and with my health issues, it's best if I'm close by. You'll need me around, especially with a teenage girl in the house. A flicker of irritation crossed Robert's face, but he remained silent. I knew he was torn, caught between his loyalty to me and his sense of duty toward his mother. The sound of footsteps on the porch steps made us all turn. A tall, slender girl with long, dark hair stepped into the entryway, her gaze flitting nervously around the room. Emma, Robert said, his expression softening. Come on in, sweetheart. Greta rushed forward, enveloping the girl in a tight embrace. My dear granddaughter, welcome to your new home. Emma stiffened, her eyes finding mine over Greta's shoulder. I offered her a tentative smile, trying to convey a sense of warmth and reassurance. As Greta released her, Emma smoothed her hands over her jeans, her shoulders hunched inward. Hi, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. It's so wonderful to have you here, Greta gushed, taking Emma's hands in her own. We're going to be one big, happy family. A knot formed in my stomach at her words. Happy family? With the way things were unfolding, that seemed like a distant dream. Robert cleared his throat, stepping forward to place a gentle hand on Emma's back. Why don't I show you to your room? Get you settled in? Emma nodded, relief flickering across her features as she followed him out of the living room and down the hallway. Greta watched them go, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. Then, as if sensing my gaze, she turned to face me, her expression hardening. Don't worry, Lydia, she said, her voice taking on a steely edge. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly around here. You can count on me. A shiver ran down my spine at the glint in her eyes. In that moment, I knew Greta's presence in our home was about more than just helping out. She had an agenda, one that threatened to upend the delicate balance I had so carefully cultivated. As I stood there, surrounded by the trappings of the life Robert and I had built together, a sense of dread washed over me. The battle lines were being drawn, and I would have to fight to protect everything I held dear. The days bled into weeks, and a tense undercurrent rippled through our household. Emma remained withdrawn, speaking only when spoken to, and retreating to her room at every opportunity. Greta, on the other hand, seemed to relish her new role as matriarch, inserting herself into every aspect of our lives. Lydia, dear, have you thought about signing Emma up for extracurriculars? She asked one morning over breakfast, her tone saccharine sweet. A girl her age needs structure and activities to keep her grounded. I exchanged a glance with Robert, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. I was going to discuss some options with her, I replied, keeping my voice level, but I wanted to give her some time to adjust first. Greta tsked disapprovingly. Well, don't wait too long. You know how teenagers can be, idle hands and all that. Emma hunched lower in her chair, her gaze fixed on her plate. My heart ached for her. This girl thrust into our lives with no say in the matter. Later that day, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Greta swept in, her footsteps purposeful. I've been thinking, she announced without preamble. Emma could use a feminine influence in her life, a strong role model to guide her. I paused, a shirt dangling from my hands as I eyed her warily. I'm her mother now, Greta. I think I can handle that role just fine. She waved a dismissive hand. Of course. But you have to admit you're a bit unconventional, a modern woman focused on your career. Her gaze drifted pointedly to the nursing textbooks stacked on the end table. Anger flared hot in my chest, but I bit back a retort, reminding myself to choose my battles carefully. Greta seemed to sense my irritation, for she softened her tone. I only want what's best for Emma, she said, resting a hand on my arm. You understand that, don't you, dear? Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps drew our attention. Emma hovered in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Everything okay? I asked, offering her a reassuring smile. She opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it, shaking her head. Never mind, she muttered, turning on her heel and retreating back down the hallway. Greta watched her go, a calculating look in her eyes. Like I said, Lydia, she needs guidance, and I intend to provide it, whether you like it or not. A shiver ran down my spine at the thinly veiled threat in her words. In that moment I knew. Greta wasn't just overstepping boundaries. She was deliberately driving a wedge between Emma and me, undermining my authority at every turn. As I stood there, clutching the crumpled shirt in my hands, a hard knot of determination formed in my gut. I wouldn't let Greta win, not without a fight. This was my family, my home, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding as I strained to make out the muffled voices drifting from downstairs. Robert stirred beside me, his brow furrowed. "What was that?" he mumbled groggily. I threw off the covers, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Stay here," I whispered, sliding out of bed and grabbing my robe from the foot of the mattress. Creeping down the hallway, I could make out Greta's shrill tones, punctuated by Emma's sullen replies. As I reached the living room, the scene that unfolded made my blood run cold. Shards of broken ceramic littered the floor, the remnants of a once pristine vase. Emma stood in the center of the chaos, her shoulders hunched defensively as Greta loomed over her, fury etched into every line of her face. "You clumsy, foolish girl!" Greta raged, jabbing a finger toward the shattered pieces. "Do you have any idea how much that cost? How precious it was to me?" Emma flinched, her gaze downcast. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Sorry?" Greta cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Sorry doesn't fix anything, does it?" Anger flared hot in my chest, and I surged forward, planting myself between them. "That's enough, Greta," I snapped, my voice laced with steel. "Leave her alone." Greta's eyes widened in outrage, her mouth working soundlessly for a moment before she found her voice. "How dare you take her side? This is exactly why she needs discipline, Lydia. You're far too soft on her." "She's a child," I shot back, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "And she made a mistake, one that doesn't warrant this kind of reaction." Greta opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash another tirade, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "No, I'm done listening to you berate her, undermine me at every turn. This is my home, Greta, my family, and I won't have you treating Emma this way anymore." For a long, tense moment, we locked eyes, a silent battle of wills playing out between us. Then, with a derisive snort, Greta spun on her heel and stormed out of the room, her slippered feet slapping against the hardwood floors. Silence descended, thick and oppressive. I turned to face Emma, my anger melting into concern as I took in her pale, stricken expression. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched away from my touch, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to defend me." My heart clenched at the raw vulnerability in her words. This poor girl, so accustomed to being cast aside, neglected, of course she wouldn't understand someone standing up for her. "Yes, I did," I said firmly, holding her gaze. "Emma, you're part of this family now, whether you believe it or not, and I'll always have your back, no matter what." A flicker of emotion crossed her features, there and gone in an instant. Then, with a jerky nod, she turned and fled the room, leaving me standing amid the shattered remains of Greta's precious vase. As I stared at the broken pieces, a grim sense of determination settled over me. This was just the beginning. Greta's true colors were starting to show, and I knew her actions would only escalate from here. But I was ready, prepared to fight for what was mine with every ounce of strength I possessed. The battle lines had been drawn, and there would be no turning back. The envelope sat innocuously on the kitchen counter, its contents promising to upend everything I thought I knew. With trembling fingers, I tore it open, my breath catching in my throat as I scanned the documents inside. Pages upon pages of financial records detailing Greta's assets and investments, all meticulously organized in her familiar looping script. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward portfolio, the kind of paperwork one would expect from a widow managing her late husband's estate. But then I saw it, a series of notations and calculations, outlining what appeared to be a plan to liquidate her holdings and funnel the proceeds into a new trust, a trust with both her name and Robert's listed as beneficiaries. My hands went numb, the papers fluttering to the countertop as the full weight of Greta's machinations slammed into me. This wasn't just about asserting control over the household. She was positioning herself to take control of our finances, our future. The sound of footsteps made me whirl around. Emma hovered in the doorway, her brow furrowed as she took in my stricken expression. "What's wrong?" she asked hesitantly. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I explain the depths of Greta's betrayal, the insidious way she had wormed her way into our lives under the guise of family? Scooping up the papers, I brushed past Emma and headed for the living room, my steps fueled by a simmering fury. Greta looked up from her knitting as I entered, her eyes narrowing at my thunderous expression. "Lydia, dear, whatever is the matter?" I flung the documents onto the coffee table, watching as they scattered across the polished surface. "This is the matter, Greta," I bit out, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Your little scheme to bleed us dry and take everything we've worked for." Comprehension dawned on her features, swiftly replaced by a mask of indignation. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" she blustered, rising to her feet. "I'm simply trying to secure my future, ensure I'm taken care of in my old age." "By stealing from your own son?" I shook my head in disgust. "You're unbelievable, Greta. Utterly shameless." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "Watch your tone with me, girl. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family." "Sacrificed?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "All you've done is take, and manipulate and undermine everyone around you for your own selfish gain." Greta opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash another torrent of vitriol, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Save it. I'm done listening to your lies." I turned on my heel, my heart pounding in my ears. "This ends now, Greta. One way or another, it all ends." As I stalked away, leaving her sputtering in outrage behind me, a grim sense of determination settled over me. Greta had shown her true colors, and there was no going back. No more playing by her rules, no more letting her run roughshod over my life. It was time to fight back, to protect what was mine at all costs. The gloves were finally off, and I intended to emerge victorious, no matter how high the stakes. I paced the length of the living room, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet as I waited for Robert to return home. The damning evidence of Greta's schemes lay strewn across the coffee table, a stark reminder of the battle lines that had been drawn. The sound of the front door opening made me whirl around. Robert stepped inside, his brow furrowing as he took in my tense posture. "Lydia? What's going on?" Without a word, I gestured toward the papers scattered across the table. He crossed the room, his frown deepening as he scanned the documents. "These are Mom's financial records," he murmured, glancing up at me with a puzzled expression. "Why are you looking at?" His voice trailed off as realization dawned, his face paling. "Oh God, she's trying to take everything, isn't she?" I nodded grimly. "It's all right there, Robert. Her plan to liquidate her assets and set up a new trust with both of your names on it." He sank onto the couch, cradling his head in his hands. "I can't believe she would do this. My own mother." Sympathy tugged at my heart, but I tamped it down, hardening my resolve. "Believe it," I said, my voice steely. "Greta has shown her true colors, and we can't afford to be blind to them any longer." Robert looked up, his eyes haunted. "What are we going to do?" I drew in a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. "We're going to stop her once and for all. But I need you with me on this, Robert. No more wavering, no more divided loyalties. It's us against her now." He held my gaze for a long moment, conflict flickering across his features. Then, with a slow nod, he straightened his shoulders. "You're right. I'm with you, Lydia. All the way." A sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. United, we stood a chance against Greta's machinations. Divided, she would surely tear us apart. Over the next few days, we strategized, poring over the financial documents and mapping out our counterattack. I knew we had to move swiftly before Greta could make her next move. Finally, the plan was in place. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I strode into the living room, where Greta sat knitting by the window. "Greta," I said, my voice ringing with authority, "we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes narrowing at my tone. "About what, dear?" "About your little scheme to take over this household and everything we've worked for." I gestured toward the documents arrayed on the coffee table. "The game is up, Greta. We know exactly what you've been plotting." For a moment she remained impassive, her expression carefully blank. Then slowly, A sly smile curved her lips. "Well, well," she purred, setting aside her knitting needles. "I see you've been a busy little bee, haven't you?" Robert stepped forward, his jaw set in a hard line. "It's over, Mom. We're not going to let you manipulate us anymore." Greta's eyes flashed with contempt as she rose to her feet, drawing herself up to her full height. "You ungrateful boy," she spat. "After everything I've done for this family, you turn on me like this?" I held up a hand, cutting off her tirade. "Enough, Greta. We're done playing by your rules. From now on, things are going to be different around here, or you can pack your bags and leave." Her gaze shifted to me, her lip curling in a sneer. "Is that a threat, Lydia?" "It's a promise," I shot back, holding her stare without flinching. "The choice is yours, but make no mistake, I will protect what's mine, no matter what it takes." For a long, tense moment, we remained locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, with a derisive snort, Greta turned on her heel and swept from the room, her slippered feet slapping against the hardwood floors. As her footsteps faded, I exhaled a long, shuddering breath, the adrenaline ebbing from my veins. Robert stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me in a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he murmured into my hair, "for standing up for us, for our family." I leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his solid presence. The war was far from over, but for now we had claimed a small victory, and I intended to savor it, because the real battle was still to come. The dining room table groaned under the weight of the lavish spread I had prepared, a feast fit for a celebration, though the atmosphere was anything but festive. Tension hung thick in the air as our extended family trickled in, casting furtive glances my way. Robert's Aunt Marjorie was the first to speak up, her brow furrowed in concern. "Lydia, dear, what's this all about? Your message sounded rather urgent." I exchanged a loaded glance with Robert, who gave me an imperceptible nod. Taking a steadying breath, I turned to face our assembled relatives. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice ringing with steely determination. "I know this was somewhat last minute, but there's an important matter we need to address as a family." Greta shifted in her seat, her eyes narrowing. "And what matter would that be exactly?" I met her challenging stare head-on, refusing to be cowed. "Your relentless attempts to undermine my authority in this household, and your underhanded schemes to take control of our finances for your own gain." A collective gasp rippled through the room as I laid out the evidence, the damning paperwork detailing Greta's meticulous plans. Shock and disbelief flickered across the faces of our relatives as the truth came to light. Greta, for her part, remained outwardly impassive, but I could see the fury simmering in her eyes, the muscle twitching in her jaw. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" she spat, rising to her feet and planting her hands on the table with a resounding thud. "I've only ever had this family's best interests at heart. By trying to bleed us dry?" I shot back, refusing to back down. "By manipulating and deceiving us at every turn? That's not love, Greta. That's greed, plain and simple." Her face contorted with rage, and for a moment I thought she might lunge across the table at me. But then a tremor ran through her frame and she seemed to deflate, sinking back into her chair. "You ungrateful, selfish girl," she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "After everything I've sacrificed." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between Greta and me, unsure of where to place their loyalties. Finally, Aunt Marjorie cleared her throat, her expression one of profound sadness. "Greta, is it true? Did you really do these things?" Greta's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then, with a jerky nod, she seemed to crumple in on herself, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She whispered, her voice barely audible, "It's all true." A collective exhalation swept through the room, as if everyone had been holding their breath. I felt a surge of vindication, tempered by an unexpected twinge of pity for the broken woman before me. Robert reached out, his hand finding mine and giving it a gentle squeeze. A silent show of support and solidarity, reminding me that we were in this together, united against the threat that had nearly torn our family apart. As the shock wore off and our relatives began to process the revelations, one by one, they turned to face Greta, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. And in that moment, I knew. The battle had been won. Greta's web of lies and manipulation had finally unraveled, leaving her exposed and powerless in the face of the family she had sought to control. It was a hollow victory, tinged with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. But as I looked around the table at the faces of those I loved most, I knew it was a sacrifice worth making to protect what truly mattered. No matter the cost, I would always fight for my family. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of freshly turned earth as I knelt in the garden, my fingers sinking into the rich soil. Beside me, Emma crouched, carefully arranging a cluster of vibrant petunias in the raised bed we had constructed. "Like this, Mom?" she asked, glancing up at me with those wide, earnest eyes that still made my heart clench with a bittersweet pang. A year ago, I never could have imagined hearing those words from her lips. The simple endearment, a reminder of how far we'd come, of the battles we'd fought, and the wounds we'd healed. "Perfect," I murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her smile bloomed, radiant and unguarded, and in that moment, the weight of our shared past seemed to lift, if only for an instant. The crunch of footsteps on the patio drew my gaze upward. Robert approached, a tray laden with glasses of lemonade balanced in his hands. His expression softened as he took in the scene before him, and I felt a surge of love and gratitude for this man who had stood by my side through it all. "Thought you two could use a refreshment break," he said, setting the tray down and sinking onto the edge of the garden bed. Emma immediately reached for a glass, gulping down the tart liquid with unabashed enthusiasm. I chuckled, shaking my head in fond exasperation before claiming a glass of my own. As I sipped the cool beverage, my gaze drifted across the meticulously tended flower beds and neatly trimmed hedges that bordered our property. This sanctuary, our home. It had nearly been torn from our grasp by the very person who should have cherished it most. Greta's absence hung like a specter, her manipulations and betrayals casting a long shadow over the hard-won peace we had finally achieved. But in the end, her greed and selfishness had been her undoing, driving her from our lives in a blaze of bitter recriminations. "You okay?" Robert's voice, soft and concerned, drew me from my reverie. I mustered a smile, reaching out to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm fine, just thinking about how far we've come." His expression sobered and he nodded slowly. "It hasn't been easy, has it? But we made it through together." Emma set down her empty glass, her brow furrowing as she studied our somber expressions. "Are you talking about Greta again?" The question, posed with the guileless candor of youth, struck a chord deep within me. So much had been sacrificed, so many battles waged, all to protect this remarkable young woman from the toxic influence of my former mother-in-law. "Yes," I said simply, holding her gaze. "But that's all in the past now. Greta made her choices, and we made ours to stand together as a family, no matter what." Emma's features softened, and she inched closer, resting her head on my shoulder in a rare display of affection. "I'm glad you did. I don't know where I'd be without you guys." A lump formed in my throat as I wrapped an arm around her slender frame, drawing her close. Robert reached out, his calloused palm cradling my cheek as he leaned in to press a tender kiss to my forehead. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant blooms and the ones I loved most, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them united. A family bound not by blood, but by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. We had won our battle against Greta's toxic influence, emerging battered but unbroken. And as I looked into the hopeful faces of my husband and daughter, I silently vowed that nothing would ever threaten the sanctuary we had created, the home we had fought so fiercely to preserve. This was our new beginning, our chance to heal and grow, and I intended to nurture it with the same fierce devotion I had shown in defending it from those who sought to destroy us. I stepped into the kitchen, my muscles still aching from a long day of personal training sessions. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the air, but the tension was even thicker. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, stood at the stove, her back rigid as she stirred a pot with unnecessary force. "Jenna, dear," she said without turning around, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you're not too tired to set the table. Eli works so hard, you know." I bit back a retort. "Of course, Evelyn. Happy to help." As I reached for the plates, Evelyn sked. "Not those, dear. The good china. We're not savages after all." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before responding. Right, the good china for a Wednesday night dinner. The front door opened, and Eli's voice called out, "I'm home!" "In here, darling," Evelyn chirped, her entire demeanor changing as her son entered the kitchen. Eli kissed his mother's cheek, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" Before I could answer, Evelyn interjected, "Oh, Eli, you must be exhausted. Sit down, let me get you a drink." I watched as my husband allowed himself to be fussed over, sinking into a chair at the table I'd just set. "Actually," I said, "I had a great day. I signed on 3 new clients and—" "That's nice, dear," Evelyn interrupted, placing a glass of whiskey in front of Eli. "But let's not bore Eli with talk of your little job. He's had such a long day at the office." Eli took a long sip of his drink, not meeting my eyes. I felt my jaw clench but forced a smile. "You're right, Evelyn. Eli, how was your day?" As Eli launched into a story about a big sale he'd closed, I busied myself helping Evelyn bring the food to the table. Just as we sat down to eat, Evelyn's phone buzzed. "Oh, excuse me," she said, glancing at the screen. "I need to take this. Start without me, dears." She stepped into the hallway, her voice dropping to a whisper. I couldn't make out most of what she was saying, but one phrase came through clear as day. "That gold digger thinks she's fooling us all." My fork clattered against my plate. Eli looked up, concern flashing across his face. "You okay, Jenna?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Evelyn returned moments later, all smiles. "So sorry about that. Now, where were we?" The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone. As soon as it was polite, I excused myself to do the dishes. Standing at the sink, I could hear Evelyn and Eli talking in low voices in the living room. I strained to make out their words, but all I caught was Evelyn saying, "Need to protect our family's assets." My hands shook as I scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. How had we gotten here? When Eli and I had decided to move in with Evelyn after his father's death, it had seemed like the right thing to do. She was lonely, and we could save money for our own place. But in the 3 months since, it felt like my entire world had shrunk to this suffocating house and Evelyn's constant criticism. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I wouldn't let Evelyn's words get to me. I wouldn't let her drive a wedge between Eli and me. We were a team, weren't we? As I dried my hands, I made a decision. I would talk to Eli tonight, lay everything out in the open. We'd find a way to make this work, to keep our family together, despite Evelyn's interference. But when I walked into our bedroom later that night, Eli was already asleep, his back turned to my side of the bed. I stood there for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of his breathing, feeling more alone than ever. Tomorrow, I promised myself, we'd talk tomorrow, and somehow we'd find a way through this. We had to. I stared at the credit card statement in disbelief, my hands shaking. "Eli, what is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up from his phone, looking annoyed. "What's what?" I thrust the paper at him. "This! A $5,000 watch? Designer suits? Eli, we can't afford this." He shrugged, turning back to his phone. "Relax, Jenna. I got a big commission last month. We're fine." "We're not fine," I insisted, feeling my frustration mount. "We're living with your mother because we're supposed to be saving money, remember?" Eli's eyes flashed. "Maybe if you contributed more to our finances, we wouldn't have to worry so much." The words hit me like a slap. "Excuse me, I work just as hard as you do." "Please," he scoffed. "Playing gym teacher to bored housewives isn't exactly bringing in the big bucks, is it?" Before I could respond, Evelyn glided into the room. "Is everything all right, dears?" I heard raised voices. Eli's demeanor changed instantly. "Everything's fine, Mom. Jenna's just a little stressed about money." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I thought you two were doing so well. Eli's been working so hard." I bit my tongue, knowing anything I said would be twisted. "It's nothing, Evelyn. Just a misunderstanding." She patted my arm condescendingly. "Don't worry, dear. I'm sure Eli will take care of everything. He always does." As she left, I turned back to Eli. "We need to talk about this. Seriously." He stood up, grabbing his keys. "Not now, Jenna. I'm meeting the guys for drinks." "Drinks?" I sputtered. "After what I just showed you?" He was already halfway out the door. "We'll talk later, okay?" The front door slammed, leaving me alone with my anger and frustration. I paced the living room, trying to calm down. This wasn't like Eli. He'd always been responsible with money before. What had changed? My eyes fell on a framed photo of Eli and his parents. Evelyn's smug smile seemed to mock me. Of course. She'd been pushing Eli to live up to his potential ever since we moved in. Apparently, that meant spending money we didn't have. The next morning, I cornered Eli before he left for work. "We need to talk about last night." He sighed, checking his watch. "Can't this wait? I'm running late." "No, it can't," I said firmly. "Eli, we're in serious trouble here. These credit card bills, the constant spending, it has to stop." He ran a hand through his hair. "What do you want me to say, Jenna?" I'm providing for us. Isn't that what you wanted?" "I want us to be partners," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "To make decisions together. This isn't you, Eli. What's really going on?" For a moment I saw a flicker of the man I married in his eyes. Then Evelyn's voice called from the kitchen. "Eli, darling, don't forget your lunch." Just like that, the moment was gone. Eli's face hardened. "I have to go. We'll talk about this later." But we didn't. Days passed, and Eli avoided any serious conversation. The credit card bills kept coming, each one worse than the last. I felt like I was drowning, watching helplessly as our future slipped away. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Eli one night after dinner while Evelyn was out at her book club. "This has to stop," I said, laying out all the bills on the coffee table. "We're drowning in debt, Eli. And for what? To impress your mother?" His face flushed with anger. "Don't bring my mother into this. She has nothing to do with it." "She has everything to do with it," I shouted, my composure finally breaking. "Ever since we moved in, you've been different, reckless, irresponsible. This isn't you, Eli. What happened to our plans, our future?" For a long moment, he was silent. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he said, "Maybe our plans have changed. Maybe this is who I really am, Jenna. Did you ever think of that?" I stared at him, feeling as if I was looking at a stranger. "If that's true," I said quietly, "then I don't know who you are anymore." As I turned to leave the room, I heard him mutter, "Maybe you never did." I paused in the doorway, my heart breaking. How had we come to this? And more importantly, where do we go from here? I took a deep breath, steeling myself before knocking on Evelyn's bedroom door. It was time to address this mess head on. "Come in," she called, her voice syrupy sweet. I stepped inside, finding Evelyn at her vanity, applying lipstick with practiced precision. "Evelyn, we need to talk about the family finances." She raised an eyebrow, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Oh? And what would you know about our family finances, dear?" I bit back a retort, reminding myself to stay calm. "I've seen the credit card statements, Evelyn. The spending is out of control. We need to rein it in before." "We?" she interrupted, swiveling to face me. "There is no we when it comes to this family's money, Jenna. That's between Eli and me." "I'm Eli's wife," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "His finances are my finances." Evelyn's laugh was cold and brittle. "Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you, to get your hands on our family's hard-earned money?" "That's not what this is about," I insisted. "We're drowning in debt, Evelyn. Can't you see that?" She stood, her eyes flashing with anger. "What I see is a gold digger trying to control my son. Eli knows what he's doing. He's a Bradshaw, after all." "Being a Bradshaw doesn't make him immune to financial ruin," I shouted, my composure finally breaking. Evelyn's hand connected with my cheek before I could react. The slap echoed in the sudden silence. "How dare you?" she hissed. "Get out of my room! Get out of my house!" I stumbled backward, my hand on my stinging cheek. "This is my house, too," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Evelyn advanced on me, her face twisted with rage. "This will never be your house. You'll never be a true Bradshaw. Eli will see that soon enough." I fled the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart raced as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. This was worse than I'd imagined. How had things spiraled so far out of control? That night, I lay awake long after Eli had fallen asleep. His soft snores felt like a betrayal. How could he sleep so peacefully while our world was crumbling? The next morning, I made a decision. If Eli and Evelyn wouldn't listen to reason, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. I made an appointment with a financial advisor, gathering every scrap of financial information I could find. As I sat in the sleek office, laying out our dire situation, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "Mrs. Bradshaw," the advisor said, her face grave, "I won't sugarcoat this. Your financial situation is precarious at best. I nodded, unsurprised. What can we do? She outlined a strict budget, debt consolidation plans, and potential lifestyle changes. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a path forward. Armed with this information, I returned home, ready to confront Eli and Evelyn once and for all. But as I walked through the front door, I froze. Eli and Evelyn sat in the living room, their faces somber. Between them on the coffee table lay a stack of papers. "Jenna," Eli said, his voice oddly flat. "We need to talk." Evelyn's smile was triumphant as she pushed the papers towards me. "It's time to face facts, dear. This marriage isn't working." My hands shook as I picked up the top sheet. Divorce papers, already signed by Eli. I looked at my husband, searching for any sign of the man I'd married. "Eli, what is this?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Jenna. Mom's right. This just isn't working anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "You're choosing her over me? Over us?" Eli's silence was all the answer I needed. Evelyn stood, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "It's for the best, dear. You'll see that in time." I stared at them, this united front against me. In that moment, something inside me hardened. "You want a divorce?" I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Fine, you'll get one. But don't think for a second this is over." I turned and walked out, leaving them stunned in my wake. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I'd fight for myself, and only myself. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers before me. The house was eerily quiet. Eli had left for work, and Evelyn was at her weekly bridge game. It was just me and this stack of papers that represented the end of my marriage. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. Was I really going to do this? Sign away 5 years of my life without a fight? A memory flashed through my mind. Eli and me on our wedding day, full of hope and dreams for our future. What had happened to those two people? The front door opened, startling me. Eli walked in, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. "Jenna," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I gestured to the papers. "I think everything's been said, don't you?" He sat across from me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry, I never meant for things to get this bad." "Then why did you sign these?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. Eli ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, she convinced me it was for the best. Said you were only after our money, that you'd leave me once you got what you wanted." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "And you believed her, after everything we've been through together?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted, "but I do know I still love you, Jenna." For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Then I remembered the cold calculation in Evelyn's eyes when she handed me these papers. "If you love me, why didn't you stand up to your mother? Why didn't you fight for us?" Eli's silence was deafening. I stood up, suddenly furious. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done being the only one fighting for this marriage. I'm done being treated like an intruder in my own home." I grabbed the pen and scrawled my signature across the bottom of the divorce papers. "There. You're free now, Eli. Free to be the son your mother always wanted." Eli's face crumpled. "Jenna, please. We can work this out." But I was beyond listening. I stormed upstairs and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. Eli followed, pleading with me to stay, to talk things through. His words washed over me, meaningless after months of neglect and betrayal. As I zipped up my suitcase, Evelyn's voice rang out from downstairs. "Eli? Darling, are you home early?" Eli's face paled. "Mom, wait." But Evelyn was already in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on my suitcase. "What's going on here?" I shouldered past her, dragging my suitcase behind me. "Congratulations, Evelyn. You got what you wanted. I'm leaving." Evelyn's triumphant smile made my blood boil. "It's for the best, dear. You'll see that in time." I whirled to face her. "No, Evelyn. What I see is a bitter, manipulative woman who can't stand the thought of her son having a life outside of her control. And you," I turned to Eli, who looked shell-shocked. "You're so weak you can't even stand up to your own mother." Evelyn gasped. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I interrupted. "You've torn apart a marriage because of your own insecurities. I hope you're happy together." I stormed down the stairs, my heart pounding. As I reached for the front door, Eli's hand caught my arm. "Jenna, please," he begged. "Don't go, we can fix this." I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with, but all I saw was a reflection of Evelyn's manipulations. "It's too late, Eli," I said softly. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I pulled away from him and walked out the door, leaving behind the suffocating world of the Bradshaws. As I threw my suitcase into the trunk of my car, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. As I drove away, I made a silent vow to myself. I would rebuild my life on my terms, and I would never again let anyone make me feel small or unworthy. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was finally free. 6 months after walking out of Eli and Evelyn's lives, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the timid, self-doubting Jenna who had let herself be pushed around. In her place stood a confident, successful business owner. My personal training business had taken off, and I'd just signed the lease on my own studio space. Life was good, or at least it was getting there. The sharp trill of my phone cut through my thoughts. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Jenna?" Eli's voice, ragged and desperate, filled the line. "I need your help." I gripped the phone tighter. "Eli, what's wrong?" "Everything," he choked out. "The business, it's gone." "I'm in trouble, Jenna, serious trouble." My heart raced. Despite everything, a part of me still cared. What kind of trouble? Financial? Legal? I made some bad decisions. Mom's furious. She's cut me off completely. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to rush to his rescue. "I'm sorry to hear that, Eli, but I don't see how I can help." "Please," he begged. "Just, can we meet? I need to explain in person." Against my better judgment, I agreed. An hour later, I sat across from Eli in a quiet cafe. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his designer clothes rumpled and stained. "I messed up, Jenna," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "After you left, I threw myself into work, made some risky investments, used company money to cover personal debts. I felt sick. How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I might go to jail." He reached across the table, grabbing my hand. "I need money, Jenna, to pay back what I took, to hire a good lawyer. You're the only one I can turn to." I pulled my hand away, shock turning to anger. "You're unbelievable, you know that? You throw me away like I'm nothing, and now you want me to bail you out?" "I know I don't deserve it," he said, tears in his eyes. "But I'm desperate. Mom won't help. She says I've brought shame on the family name." A bitter laugh escaped me. "And what about me, Eli? What about the shame and humiliation you put me through?" He hung his head. "I'm sorry. I was weak. I let Mom manipulate me. I see that now." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered the coldness in his eyes when he'd handed me those divorce papers. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I won't help you, Eli. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." I stood to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. "If you don't help me, I'll have to drag you into this," he said, desperation making his voice ugly. "We were still married when some of this happened. You could be implicated too." I stared at him, disbelief turning to fury. "Are you threatening me?" He backpedaled quickly. "No. I don't know what else to do." In that moment, I saw Eli clearly for the first time. Not as the charming man I'd fallen in love with or the weak-willed son Evelyn had molded, but as a desperate, cornered animal willing to do anything to save himself. "Goodbye, Eli," I said, my voice cold. "Don't contact me again." As I walked out of the cafe, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my lawyer, confirming our appointment to discuss finalizing the divorce. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. I'd worked too hard to let Eli drag me back to his mess. It was time to cut all ties, once and for all. But as I drove home, doubt crept in. What if Eli wasn't bluffing? Could I really be implicated in his financial misdeeds? And more importantly, was I strong enough to stand my ground if he came after me? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, determination setting in. I'd fought too hard for my independence to give it up now. Whatever Eli threw at me, I'd face it head on. It was time to show the Bradshaws and myself just how strong I'd become. I stood outside the imposing Bradshaw mansion, my heart pounding. It had been months since I'd last seen this place, but today I wasn't here as the meek daughter-in-law. I was here to demand what was rightfully mine. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Moments later, Evelyn answered, her eyes widening in surprise. Jenna, what are you doing here? I pushed past her into the foyer. Where's Eli? We need to talk. Evelyn's face hardened. Eli's not here and you're not welcome. Save it, Evelyn, I interrupted. I know about the debts. I know about everything. Her composure slipped for a moment before she regained control. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, I snapped. Eli's been using my name on loan applications. Did you know that? Or did you conveniently overlook it when you were pushing him to spend beyond his means? Evelyn's face paled. That's ridiculous. Eli would never. But he did, I said, pulling out a stack of papers from my bag. And now I'm on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that you two racked up. Just then, Eli stumbled into the room looking disheveled and hungover. Jenna? What's going on? I turned to face him, my anger reaching a boiling point. What's going on is that you've royally screwed us both, Eli. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the loans? The credit cards? Eli's face crumpled. I was going to tell you. I just needed more time. Time for what? I demanded. To dig us into an even deeper hole? Evelyn stepped between us. Now let's all calm down. I'm sure we can work this out like adults. I laughed bitterly. Oh, now you want to be reasonable? Where was this attitude when you were poisoning Eli against me? When you were pushing him to spend money we didn't have? I was only trying to protect our family, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Protect? I spat. You've destroyed it. And now you're both going to make this right. I laid out my demands. Eli would take full responsibility for the debts, clearing my name from all financial obligations. In return, I wouldn't press charges for fraud. Eli nodded meekly, but Evelyn bristled. You can't do this. We'll fight you every step of the way. Go ahead, I challenged. I have nothing left to lose. But you? Your precious family name will be dragged through the mud. Is that what you want, Evelyn? For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She turned to Eli. Don't listen to her. We can find another way. But Eli shook his head. No, Mom. Jenna's right. I messed up. Big time. It's time I faced the consequences. Evelyn's face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for you? You ungrateful. Enough, I shouted, silencing them both. Here's what's going to happen. Eli, you're going to sign these papers taking full responsibility for the debts. Evelyn, you're going to use your connections to help clear my name. And then I never want to hear from either of you again. Are we clear? The silence that followed was deafening. Eli nodded slowly, reaching for the pen. But as he was about to sign, Evelyn made a last, desperate move. Wait, she cried. What if we offered you money to make this all go away? I stared at her, disbelief turning to disgust. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about doing what's right. With shaking hands, Eli signed the papers. As I gathered them up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But the battle wasn't over yet. I turned to leave, but Evelyn's voice stopped me. This isn't over, Jenna. You'll regret this. I met her gaze, unflinching. No, Evelyn. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. As I walked out of the Bradshaw mansion for the last time, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. The papers were signed, but would Eli and Evelyn follow through? Or was this just the beginning of an even bigger fight? I squared my shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. I'd found my strength, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away from me again. I stood behind the counter of my newly opened fitness studio, surveying the bustling space with a sense of pride. Months of hard work had paid off, and my business was thriving. As I watched a group of women laughing during their cool-down stretches, I felt a warmth in my chest. This was what success felt like. The bell above the door chimed, and I froze. Evelyn Bradshaw stood in the entrance, looking as polished and imperious as ever. Jenna, dear, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. What a lovely little gym you have here. I steeled myself, forcing a neutral expression. Evelyn, what are you doing here? She glided towards me, her eyes scanning the room. Can't a mother-in-law visit? We have so much to discuss. Ex-mother-in-law, I corrected. And we have nothing to discuss. The divorce is final. Evelyn's smile tightened. About that, I think we may have been hasty in our judgments. I raised an eyebrow. We? Eli misses you terribly, she continued, ignoring my interruption. And I've come to see that perhaps I was mistaken about you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mistaken? You tried to destroy me, Evelyn. You and Eli both. She waved a hand dismissively. Water under the bridge, dear. The important thing is we want you back in the family. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You can't be serious. I'm always serious when it comes to family, Evelyn said, her eyes glinting. And let's be honest, Jenna, you've done well for yourself, but wouldn't you rather have the Bradshaw name and fortune behind you again? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This isn't about reconciliation. This is about money. Evelyn's mask slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of desperation. The family business is struggling. Eli's missteps have cost us dearly, but with your success, your connections in the fitness world. You want to use me to save your family's reputation, I said, disgust rising in my throat. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement, Evelyn pressed. You'd have everything you ever wanted, the wealth, the status, the family. For a split second I faltered. The idea of never having to worry about money again was tempting, but then I remembered the endless nights of tears, the constant belittling, the betrayal. No, I said, my voice firm, I don't want any of that. Not anymore. Evelyn's face hardened. Don't be a fool, Jenna. You'll never have an opportunity like this again. Good, I shot back, because I don't need your money or your name. I've built something for myself, something real, and I won't let you take that away from me. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a hiss. You ungrateful little gold digger. You think you can turn your back on the Bradshaws? We made you. I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. No, Evelyn, you tried to break me, but I remade myself. The bell chimed again, and Eli walked in, looking sheepish. Mom, what's going on? I turned to him, my resolve strengthening. Your mother was just leaving, and so are you. Eli's face fell. Jenna, please, we can work this out. I've changed, I swear. It's too late, I said, my voice steady. I've moved on, and it's time you both did too. Evelyn grabbed Eli's arm, her face a mask of fury. Come, Eli, we don't need her. We'll find another way. As they stormed out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I'd faced my demons and come out stronger. But as I turned back to my studio, a nagging doubt crept in. Would the Bradshaws really let this go? Or was this just the calm before an even bigger storm? I shook off the thought, focusing on the women still working out, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Whatever came next, I was ready. I'd fought too hard for my independence to let anyone take it away now. As I rejoined my class, guiding them through their final stretches, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I was truly free. And no amount of money or status could ever compare to that feeling. I sat in my doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound image in my hands. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, filling me with a mixture of joy and trepidation. As I walked out into the bright sunlight, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Bradshaw family empire crumbles. CEO Eli Bradshaw arrested for fraud. My heart raced as I clicked on the article. There, in stark black and white, was the story of Eli and Evelyn's downfall. The family business had collapsed under the weight of Eli's mismanagement and fraudulent activities. Evelyn, it seemed, had suffered a stress-induced stroke and was now in a long-term care facility. A part of me felt a twisted satisfaction. Wasn't this what I had wanted? To see them suffer as I had? But as I placed a hand on my still flat stomach, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This wasn't justice. It was tragedy. My phone rang, startling me. It was Eli. Jenna. His voice was broken, desperate. I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. Mom's medical bills, the legal fees. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, torn between compassion and self-preservation. I'm sorry, Eli, but I can't get involved, not anymore. Please, he begged. You're the only one who ever truly cared about us, about me. The old Jenna would have caved, would have rushed to his rescue, but I wasn't that woman anymore. No, Eli, I said firmly. You're right. I did care, but you and Evelyn threw that away. I've moved on, and it's time you did too. As I ended the call, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For so long I had carried the burden of their expectations, their judgments, but now I was free. I walked to the park near my apartment, settling on a bench to watch children play. My hand rested on my stomach, and I thought about the future stretching out before me, a future I had built for myself, brick by brick. Is this seat taken? I looked up to see Mark, my neighbor and friend, smiling down at me. Over the past few months, he had become a constant source of support and laughter in my life. It's all yours, I said, patting the spot next to me. As he sat down, I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with morning sickness. "Mark, I have something to tell you." His eyes met mine, warm and understanding. "I'm listening." Taking a deep breath, I shared my news. To my surprise and delight, his face lit up with joy. "Jenna, that's wonderful," he exclaimed, taking my hand in his. I know we haven't talked about where this is going, but I want you to know I'm here for you, for both of you if you'll have me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "I'd like that, very much." As we sat there planning and dreaming, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle to find myself again. But also the strength I had discovered, the resilience I had built. The Bradshaws' world might have crumbled, but mine was just beginning to bloom. And as I looked at Mark, at the future we might build together, I realized that true wealth had nothing to do with money or status. It was about love, trust, and the family we choose for ourselves. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert about the Bradshaws' downfall. But this time, I ignored it. Their story was no longer mine to carry. I had my own story to write now, a new chapter filled with hope and possibility. As Mark and I left the park hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me, and the future, full of promise, lay ahead. Whatever challenges came next, I knew I had the strength to face them. Not as Jenna Bradshaw, the scorned wife, but as Jenna, the woman who had reclaimed her life and found her own path to happiness. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.
The sound of the door slamming still echoes in my mind 5 years later. My sister's face, twisted with disgust, is forever etched in my memory. "You made your choices, Riley," she had said. "Don't come crying to me now." I'm Riley Rodriguez, and that was the last time I spoke to my sister Selena face to face. Until today. My phone buzzes with another message from Olive. "Are you sure you want to look at those old photos? Nothing good comes from dwelling on the past." I smile at my best friend's concern, but continue scrolling through the family album on my laptop. There we are, Selena and me at my college graduation. Her arm around my shoulder, both of us beaming. Back when I thought family meant something to her. Back before I lost everything. "I need to do this," I text back to Olive. "Meeting with Margaret in an hour about the Stevens account. Need to stay sharp." The photos tell a story of two sisters who took very different paths. Selena, the golden child, built her empire from scratch. Designer clothes, magazine covers, that signature red lipstick that became her trademark. Meanwhile, I chose non-profit work, helping small businesses stay afloat. "Following your heart will leave you broke," Selena would say at family dinners. She wasn't wrong. When the non-profit I worked for collapsed, everything fell like dominoes. My savings disappeared into medical bills after my car accident. Insurance denied the claim. Rent past due. Each day brought a new crisis until that rainy November morning when I stood at Selena's door, swallowing my pride. My phone rings. It's Margaret. "Riley, you're not going to believe who just walked into my office," she says, her voice tense. "Who?" "Julius Gray." My hand freezes on the mouse. Julius, Selena's former business partner who helped build her empire. "What did he want?" "Information about your sister's companies. He's planning something big, and it's not good." I lean back in my chair, processing this. Does Selena know? "That's the thing," Margaret says. "I don't think she does. And from what I'm hearing, her empire isn't as solid as everyone thinks. The market's been brutal this quarter. A notification pops up on my screen. A news alert about Selena's company stock dropping 15%. Then another about potential layoffs. "Riley," Margaret's voice softens, "I know your history with her, but you might be the only person who can help her now." I laugh, but it comes out harsh. "Help her? Like she helped me?" "You're not her," Margaret says simply. Before I can respond, my email chimes. From Selena Rodriguez. Subject: "We need to talk." "I have to go, Margaret. The Stevens meeting is cancelled. They just called. Use the time to think about what I said." I open Selena's email. 3 lines. "I know we haven't spoken. I know I don't deserve your time. but please, just one meeting. Olive calls immediately after I forward her the email. Don't you dare, she says without greeting. Remember what happened last time? Remember sleeping in your car? I remember everything, I say, my voice steady. The shelter, the food banks, the nights I couldn't sleep because I was so hungry. Exactly. So why even consider? Because, I interrupt, an idea forming, sometimes the best revenge isn't what people expect. Riley, trust me, I say, already typing my response to Selena. I learned a lot these past 5 years, about business, about people, about how money really works. What are you planning? I think about the foundation proposal sitting in my drafts folder, about all the women I've met who were one crisis away from where I had been, about karma and justice, and how sometimes they need a little push. Something she'll never see coming, I reply, hitting send on my response to Selena. Something that will make every moment of suffering worth it. Olive is quiet for a moment. Just promise me you won't let her hurt you again. I look at the last photo in the album, Selena and me as kids, holding hands, facing the camera with matching grins, before money and success changed her, before she learned to see people as either assets or liabilities. Don't worry, I say, closing my laptop. This time, I'm the one writing the story. You can't sleep in your car forever, Olive had said, standing in the rain beside my old Honda Civic. That was the night everything changed, exactly 4 years and 8 months ago. Watch me, I'd replied, huddled in my back seat under a thin blanket, surrounded by whatever possessions I could fit when the eviction notice came. But Olive wouldn't leave. She knocked on my window until I rolled it down. My couch isn't much, but it's yours if you want it. That couch became my salvation. I stare at it now, sitting in Olive's living room, remembering those first few months of rebuilding my life from nothing. Earth to Riley, Olive waves her hand in front of my face. You're doing that 1,000-yard stare again. Sorry, just thinking about how different things were back then. Different is an understatement, she says, settling beside me with 2 glasses of wine. Remember your first job interview after everything? I groan. God, don't remind me. I couldn't even afford proper interview clothes. Until Ralph swooped in like some tech angel in a hoodie, Olive grins. Ralph had been my first client when I started freelance consulting, though neither of us knew it at the time. I met him at a coffee shop where I was using the free Wi-Fi to send out resumes. He was struggling with his startup's business plan, and I offered advice while waiting for my $1 a coffee to cool. My phone buzzes. Speaking of Ralph. How'd the meeting with your sister go? His text reads. Tomorrow, I reply. Having second thoughts. The response is immediate. Don't. Remember what you told me. Sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as our worst memories. I said that? You did. Right before you helped me secure my first round of funding. Now look at us. I smile, remembering how Ralph's success helped launch my consulting career. One client led to another. Small startups became medium businesses. Medium became large. Eventually, Margaret noticed my work and brought me into her firm. Ralph says hi, I tell Olive, who's watching me with knowing eyes. Tell him thanks for the donation to the shelter program. That's another thing that changed. Once I got back on my feet, I started volunteering at the same shelter that helped me. Ralph matched every hour I volunteered with a generous donation. You know, Olive says carefully, what you're planning with Selena. It's risky. I set down my wine glass. Everything worth doing is risky, but using her own money to fund a foundation for homeless women, without her knowledge, that's more than risky, that's... Justice, I interrupt. Do you know how many women I've met who ended up homeless because someone like Selena refused to help them? Women with degrees, careers, families, one crisis away from losing everything. My phone rings. Margaret. Julius is making his move, she says without preamble. He's buying up shares through shell companies. Your sister's board meeting is in chaos. I check the time. Thanks for the heads up. I'm meeting her at 9 tomorrow. Be careful, Riley. Desperate people do desperate things. After hanging up, I pull out my laptop and open the foundation proposal. The framework is solid. I've spent months perfecting it. A legitimate charitable organization, properly registered, with one subtle twist. All major decisions would require approval from a board of directors, a board I would carefully select. What are you smiling about? Olive asks. Remember that business law course I took at the community college while sleeping on your couch? She nods. Best investment I ever made. Well, that and the coffee I bought Ralph. My phone buzzes again. Selena. Confirming tomorrow, 9 a.m. my office. I type back a simple, see you then. Olive reads the message over my shoulder. You're really doing this? I stand up and walk to her bookshelf, picking up a framed photo from 3 years ago. Me, Olive, and Ralph at the opening of the first women's shelter we helped fund. When I was at my lowest, I say, Selena taught me that family isn't always what we think it is. Sometimes family is the friend who offers their couch, or the stranger who believes in your advice over coffee. And sometimes family is the sister who slams the door in your face, Olive adds softly. Exactly. Tomorrow I'm going to teach her that lesson, but not by slamming doors, by opening them for others. I gather my things, hugging Olive goodbye. Outside, the night air is crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. My car, a modest but reliable Toyota now, starts smoothly. No more sleeping in the back seat. As I drive home, I think about the women who will benefit from the foundation. Women like I was, who just need someone to open a door instead of slamming it shut. Tomorrow, Selena will unknowingly become that someone. My phone lights up with one final text from Ralph. Remember, revenge is a dish best served with a side of karma. I smile, turning onto my street. Oh, sister dear, you have no idea what's coming. Selena's office hasn't changed. Same pretentious art on the walls. Same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Same assistant giving me the same disapproving look as I walk in at exactly 9 a.m. Ms. Rodriguez will be with you shortly, she says, not offering me a seat. I sit anyway, smoothing my charcoal grey blazer, the one I bought with my first real consulting check. 5 minutes pass, 10, 15, a power play I recognize from my sister's old playbook. At 9:22, the door opens. Selena steps out, perfect as always in her trademark red lipstick and designer suit, but there's something different in her eyes, something scared. Riley, she says, voice carefully controlled. Thank you for coming. I stand, matching her professional tone. 15 minutes is a long time to keep someone waiting, Selena. She flinches slightly. Good. Please, come in. Her office is smaller than I remember, the view less impressive, or maybe I've just grown used to better things. Coffee, she offers. Let's skip the pleasantries. Your email said it was urgent. Selena sits behind her desk, gesturing for me to take the chair opposite. I need your help. Funny how history repeats itself. I deserve that, she says, surprising me with her directness. But this isn't just about me. 2,000 people work for this company. Good people with families, mortgages, kids in college. And Julius Gray is trying to take it all away? Her eyes widen. How did you... I have my sources. Tell me what happened. Selena's composure cracks slightly. He's been planning this for months. Shell companies, quiet stock purchases. Now he's making his move for a hostile takeover. And you're bored, scared. Stock's down 30%. Clients are nervous. Julius is offering them deals they can't refuse. I lean back, letting her sweat a little. What exactly do you want from me? Your consulting firm specializes in corporate restructuring. Margaret says you're the best she's ever seen. I need you to help me save my company. Our father's company, I correct her. The one you inherited while I got his old watch and a pile of medical bills. Selena's hands clench on her desk. I built this company into what it is today. And now you're watching it crumble. I stand up, walking to the window. Why should I help you? Because you're better than me. The words burst out of her. Because 5 years ago, I was wrong. I was cruel and selfish and I've regretted it every day since. I turn to face her. Have you? Or do you just regret needing me now? Her phone buzzes. Probably another crisis. She ignores it. I deserve your hate. But please, Riley, help me fix this. On one condition, I say, pulling out a folder from my briefcase. You sign these papers. Today. What are they? Authorization to create a charitable foundation in your name. 15% of company profits, dedicated to helping women in financial crisis. Selena reaches for the papers, scanning them quickly. Her eyes narrow. This is already set up. You've been planning this. Let's just say I came prepared. The board would never approve. The board won't have a choice once Julius makes his move. Sign now, and I'll help you keep control. Don't sign. I pick up my briefcase. Well, I hear Julius is looking for consultants. Selena's phone buzzes again, and again. She glances at it, face paling. He's making an announcement in an hour. Tick-tock, sister dear. Her hand trembles slightly as she reaches for a pen. You've changed. Homelessness will do that to you. She signs each page, each signature seeming to cost her physically. When she finishes, I take the papers, checking them carefully. Now what? She asks. I pull out my phone, sending a quick text to Margaret. Now we go to war. Call your board. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. I'll handle Julius. How? I smile, remembering the nights I spent researching Julius's company structure, finding the weaknesses. Let's just say I've had a lot of time to plan this moment. As I turn to leave, Selena calls out, Riley, thank you. I pause at the door. Don't thank me yet. And Selena, next time someone asks you for help, remember how this feels. In the elevator, I text Olive. She signed. Holy shit, comes the reply. You actually did it. Phase 1 complete. Tell Ralph to get ready with the press release about the foundation. Time to show my dear sister what real power looks like. The elevator doors open to the lobby. Through the glass doors, I can see reporters already gathering, waiting for Julius's announcement. They have no idea what's really coming. My phone buzzes with a message from Margaret. Board meeting confirmed. Ready to rain hell? I step out into the sunshine, smiling. Oh, sister dear, I whisper. You have no idea what you just signed up for. The boardroom crackles with tension. 12 pairs of eyes watch me as I stand at the head of the table, projector remote in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I begin, in exactly 20 minutes, Julius Gray will announce his takeover bid. But first, let me show you something interesting. I click through slides showing financial records, shell companies, and transaction histories. With each revelation, the board members lean forward, whispers growing louder. As you can see, I continue, Mr. Gray's hostile takeover isn't just aggressive, it's illegal. These transactions, I highlight several red flag transfers. Classic market manipulation. How did you get this information? Demands Thomas, the oldest board member. Let's just say I've been watching Julius for a while, and I'm not the only one. I nod to Margaret, who opens her laptop. The SEC has already been notified, she announces. They're launching an investigation as we speak. Selena, sitting at the far end of the table, hasn't said a word. Her face is a mask, but I recognize the slight tremor in her hand as she reaches for her water glass. My phone buzzes. Ralph's message. Press release ready. Foundation announcement set to go live in 5. But that's not all, I say, switching to the next slide. While Julius was plotting his takeover, we've been working on something else. Something that will not only save this company, but transform it. The door bursts open. Julius Gray himself strides in, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. I hope I'm not interrupting, he says, flashing his trademark smile. Actually, I reply, your timing is perfect. We were just discussing your creative accounting practices. His smile falters slightly. And you are? Riley Rodriguez, Selena's sister. We've never met, but I know all about you, Julius, including what really happened with those offshore accounts in 2019. The color drains from his face. Behind him, One of his lawyers whispers something urgent. Ladies and gentlemen, I address the board again. In about 30 seconds, two things will happen. First, the SEC will announce their investigation into Mr. Gray's activities. Second, my phone chimes. Right on cue. The company will announce the creation of the Rodriguez Foundation for Women in Crisis, funded by 15% of annual profits, effective immediately. Chaos erupts. Board members shout questions. Julius's lawyers frantically check their phones. Through it all, I lock eyes with Selena, who finally understands what I've done. This is illegal, Julius sputters. You can't. Actually, we can, Margaret interjects, sliding documents across the table. The foundation was approved this morning, by Selena herself. And the best part? I add, pulling up the final slide. The press loves it. Social media is already exploding. Your stock price? I point to the rising graph. Up 12% in the last 5 minutes. Julius storms out, lawyers trailing behind. The board members cluster around Margaret, examining documents and asking questions. I slip out onto the balcony, needing air. Selena follows me. You planned this all along, she says quietly. From the day you slammed your door in my face. The foundation, it's really going to help women like I was. Yes, every penny will go to women who just need a chance. A door opened instead of closed. She leans against the railing. I deserved this. It's not about what you deserve. It's about what others need. My phone buzzes again. Olive, you're trending on Twitter. The foundation's website is crashing from traffic. Riley? Selena's voice is small. What happens now? Now I help you rebuild your company. The right way this time, with actual values instead of just profit margins. And Julius? I smile, showing her my phone screen. A breaking news alert about the SEC investigation. Let's just say he'll be too busy with federal investigators to bother us. Us? Yes, us. Because like it or not, we're family. And families. I pause, remembering Olive's couch, Ralph's coffee shop advice, Margaret's mentorship. Families help each other, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Back in the boardroom, Margaret is wrapping up the emergency session. The foundation announcement has overshadowed Julius's takeover attempt completely. Crisis averted, at least for now. One more thing, I tell Selena before we rejoin the others. Tomorrow morning, you're coming with me to visit a women's shelter. Time you saw firsthand what your foundation will be supporting. She nods, and for a moment I see a glimpse of my sister from before, the one who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who taught me to ride a bike, who dreamed of changing the world before money changed her instead. My phone lights up with another message from Ralph. Karma delivered with interest. I type back, not karma, something better, change. Looking at Selena's humbled expression as she faces her board members, I realize revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is forcing someone to become a better person than they ever thought they could be. This is where you stayed. Selena's heels click against the shelter's linoleum floor. She looks out of place in her designer suit, clutching her purse like a shield. Third bed from the window, I point to the empty cot. I spent 2 weeks here before Olive found me. Maria, the shelter director, leads us through the common area where women sit with their laptops, working on resumes or taking online courses. Most of our residents are employed, she explains. They're just one paycheck away from stability. Selena stops at a table where a woman in business casual attire types frantically on her laptop. I know you, she says suddenly. You were a senior accountant at Maxwell Corp. The woman looks up, recognition flickering across her face. Ms. Rodriguez, yes, before the layoffs. I watch my sister's facade crack slightly. This woman could have been me, could have been her. Tell me what you need, Selena says abruptly. Not the shelter, you personally. What would it take to get you back on your feet? The woman, Sarah, blinks in surprise. 3 months' rent for a security deposit, a reliable laptop, professional clothes for interviews. Selena pulls out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Done. Maria will help coordinate, and I want your resume on my desk Monday morning. My phone buzzes. Ralph sending updates about the Foundation's first wave of grants. 20 applications processed, he writes. Stories that'll break your heart. Make it 30, I text back. I'm authorizing more funds. A child's laugh draws my attention. A little girl, maybe 6, shows her mother something on a tablet, one of the educational devices Ralph donated. They're not statistics anymore, are they? I ask Selena quietly. She shakes her head, watching Sarah return to her job search with renewed energy. How did I become so blind? The same way most people do. Success makes it easy to forget what struggle feels like. Maria leads us to her office, spreading out papers across her desk. These are the programs we'd like to implement with the Foundation's support. Job training, childcare, emergency rental assistance. A commotion outside interrupts her. Through the window, we see news vans pulling up. Who called them? I demand. I did. Selena stands straighter. It's time people saw the real work happening here. My phone explodes with messages. Olive, turn on channel 7. Margaret, stock's up another 8%. Ralph, donations pouring in. Selena faces the cameras with the same confidence she uses in board meetings, but her words are different now. Today, the Rodriguez Foundation announces its first initiative, Project Fresh Start. We're partnering with shelters across the city to provide immediate assistance to women in crisis. I stand back, watching my sister transform from corporate shark to passionate advocate. The shelter residents gather around the TV in the common room, hearing their stories being told with dignity instead of pity. You did this, Maria says beside me. You changed her. She changed herself. I just showed her the door. My phone rings, Margaret with urgent news. Julius is making moves, she warns. His lawyers are challenging the Foundation structure. Let them, I reply, watching Selena kneel to talk to the little girl with the tablet. We have something he doesn't. What's that? Public opinion. And a conscience. After the interviews, Selena pulls me aside. The board's nervous about the Foundation's scope. They're saying 15% is too much. Show them today's stock prices. Show them the press coverage. Show them Sarah's resume on Monday. Trust me, they'll understand the value. She nods, then hesitates. Riley, that night, when you came to my door... Don't, I cut her off. We can't change the past, but we can make sure no one else has to live it. My phone lights up with another message from Ralph. Emergency shelter in Brooklyn needs immediate funding. Pipes burst, 30 women displaced. I show Selena the message. Without hesitation, she makes the call. Get them hotel rooms, all of them. Send the bill to my personal account. As we leave the shelter, Sarah stops us. Ms. Rodriguez, both of you, thank you. Selena hands her a business card. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. In the car, Selena stares out the window at the shelter growing smaller in the distance. I need to make some changes at the company, she says finally. Real changes. I know. Will you help me? I think about the folder on my laptop. Plans for employee assistance programs, affordable childcare, flexible work policies. Changes I've been drafting since the day I started plotting this revenge that became something else entirely. Yes, I say, but not for you, for them. My phone buzzes one last time. Olive sending a photo of the shelter's TV screen showing Selena's interview. The caption reads, "Sometimes the best revenge is forcing someone to become their better self." I look at my sister, seeing not the woman who slammed her door, but the one who just opened dozens for others. Ready to really change the world? I ask. She nods, and for the first time in years, I believe her. You can't hide behind charity forever. Julius's voice booms across the conference room. He slams a stack of papers onto the table. These numbers don't lie. I stand at the window, watching rain streak down the glass while Selena faces her former partner. 2 weeks of foundation success, and now this. The numbers tell exactly the story we want them to tell, I say, turning around. Your problem, Julius, is that you're looking at the wrong metrics. Margaret enters with a fresh set of reports, quarterly projections, hot off the press. More fairy tales, Julius sneers. Actually, Margaret slides the reports across the table. These came from your own analysts. They're jumping ship, Julius. 3 called me this morning alone. His face reddens. This is absurd. You're destroying a perfectly good company with this bleeding heart nonsense. Selina, who's been quietly reviewing the papers, looks up. Like you destroyed those pension funds in 2019. The room goes silent. Julius's lawyer whispers something urgent in his ear. That's right, I say, pulling up emails on the projector screen. We found those too. Funny how karma works. My phone buzzes. Ralph. SEC investigators just left my office, showed them everything. You're bluffing, Julius says, but sweat beads on his forehead. Am I? I project more documents. These women you laid off without severance. They're now receiving support through our foundation, and they're very interested in talking to federal investigators. The conference room door opens. Sarah, the accountant from the shelter, walks in wearing a crisp new suit. Perfect timing, I say. Julius, meet our new compliance officer. She has quite a story to tell about Maxwell Corp's creative accounting. Julius stands abruptly. This meeting is over. No. Selina's voice cuts like steel. It's just beginning. Sit down. To everyone's surprise, including mine, he sits. Here's what's going to happen, Selina continues. You're going to sign over your shares, all of them, to the foundation. In return, we don't release what Sarah found in those offshore accounts. My phone lights up again. Olive. News van's outside. Someone leaked about the SEC investigation. Julius's lawyer frantically whispers in his ear again. His face goes from red to pale. You wouldn't dare, he says to Selina. The sister you knew wouldn't, she replies. But I'm not that person anymore. Riley taught me something about consequences. Sarah steps forward, opening her laptop. Should I show everyone what I found about the Singapore transactions? Julius grabs the share transfer papers. This is blackmail. No, I correct him. This is justice. For every person you stepped on climbing to the top, he signs, hands shaking. As his lawyer reviews the documents, my phone buzzes with messages from Ralph and Margaret. Everything's in place. One more thing, Selina adds as Julius stands to leave. The foundation will be using your former office as its headquarters. Seems fitting. After he storms out, Sarah turns to us. That felt good. Too good, I say, checking my phone. Olive says reporters are asking about Julius's resignation. We need to control this narrative. Already on it, Margaret says, typing on her tablet. Press release going out. Julius Gray steps down to pursue philanthropic interests, donates shares to Women's Foundation. Selina laughs, a real laugh I haven't heard in years. Philanthropic interests. Perfect. My phone rings. Ralph again. You need to see this. Trading floors going crazy. Stocks up 20% on the news. Send me the numbers, I tell him. And Ralph, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, he replies. Julia still has friends. Powerful ones. As if on cue, Margaret's tablet chimes with alerts. 3 board members just called emergency meetings. They're nervous about the changes. Let them be nervous, Selina says, surprising me again. We're doing the right thing, finally. Sarah shows us something on her laptop. Social media exploding with support for the foundation. Women sharing stories, offering help, asking about programs. This is bigger than us now, I realize aloud. It always was, Selina replies softly. I just couldn't see it before. My phone buzzes one last time. Olive sending a photo from the shelter. The little girl with the tablet is showing other kids how to use educational software Ralph developed. Worth it? Selina asks, seeing my smile. I think about my journey from her doorstep to this moment, about revenge transforming into redemption, about doors closing and opening. Almost, I reply. There's still work to do. Margaret clears her throat. Speaking of work, those board members are waiting. Let them wait, Selena says. Sarah, show us what else you found in those accounts. Time to make sure Julius's friends understand exactly what happens when they choose the wrong side of history. I watch my sister, this new version of her, take charge with purpose instead of pride. My phone lights up with another message from Ralph. Ready for phase 2? I look at Selena, at Sarah, at the empire transforming under our feet. Yes, I type back, time to really shake things up. They're calling for your resignation, Margaret announces, dropping the morning papers on Selena's desk. All 3 major shareholders. Selena doesn't look up from her laptop. Let them. This isn't a game, I interject, pacing the office. Julius's old office, now transformed into the Foundation's headquarters. They're saying the company's lost its way, that we've turned a profit machine into a charity case. Have we? Selena finally looks up. Check the quarterly reports. My phone buzzes. Ralph sending the latest numbers. I read them twice to be sure. Profit's up 30%, I say, surprised. How? Employee retention is at an all-time high, Sarah explains, entering with more reports. Turns out people work harder when they're not terrified of ending up homeless. The intercom crackles. Ms. Rodriguez, the board members are here. Both of us? I ask. All of them, Selena replies, standing. Ready to face the firing squad? The boardroom feels colder than usual. 12 stern faces, 3 empty chairs where Julius's allies used to sit. My phone vibrates. Olive wishing us luck. This has gone far enough, Thomas begins, waving a newspaper. The Rodriguez Foundation is overshadowing our core business. Is it? Selena pulls up the quarterly projections. Because these numbers tell a different story. Numbers can lie, another board member interrupts. People don't, I say, nodding to Sarah, who opens the door. 5 women enter, former executives, all hired back after being laid off under Julius's regime. Each carries a folder. Meet your new department heads, I announce, and your most profitable division leaders. This is irregular, Thomas sputters. So is embezzlement, Sarah says quietly, sliding documents across the table. Interesting files Julius left behind, about certain board members' private accounts. The room goes silent. My phone lights up, Margaret sending a thumbs up from her position outside. You're blackmailing us? Thomas asks, voice shaking. No, Selena stands. We're showing you the future, a company that profits by lifting people up, not stepping on them. Impossible, someone mutters. Really? I project new figures on the screen. Our employee assistance program cut turnover by 60%. The childcare initiative increased productivity by 40%. The emergency fund eliminated stress-related sick days. And the foundation, Thomas demands, generated more positive press than our last 5 marketing campaigns combined, one of the returning executives answers. Customer loyalty is through the roof. My phone buzzes again. Ralph. News about Julius just broke. Turn on TV now. I grab the remote. Every channel shows the same headline. Tech giant CEO arrested on fraud charges. Julius was just the beginning. Selena addresses the stunned board. The old way of doing business is over. You can either evolve with us or follow him out the door. You've changed, Thomas says to Selena. Yes, she replies. Thanks to my sister, I remembered who I was before money became more important than people. The boardroom door bursts open. Margaret rushes in, tablet in hand. You need to see this. Social media exploding, stock price soaring. Rodriguez revolution trending worldwide. The Foundation's first success story just went viral, Margaret explains, playing a video. Sarah appears on screen, telling her story. From senior accountant to homeless to compliance officer. Comments flood in. Similar stories, offers of help, pledges of support. This isn't just about business anymore, I tell the board. This is about legacy. What do you want to be remembered for? Thomas looks at the numbers again, then at the returning executives. then at the news coverage of Julius in handcuffs. "I move to approve the Foundation's expanded charter," he says finally. One by one, the board members nod agreement. My phone lights up with messages from Ralph and Olive. They've been watching the live stream. "Congratulations," Margaret whispers as the board files out. "You did it." But Selena isn't celebrating. She stands at the window, watching the city below. "What's wrong?" I ask. "We won." "Did we?" She turns, eyes glistening. "All those years I was so wrong. About business, about people, about you." "The past is past," I start, but she cuts me off. "No, let me finish. When you came to my door that night, I thought I was protecting my success. Instead, I was losing my soul." My phone buzzes. A photo from Olive. The shelter's common room, packed with women watching the news about our company's transformation. "Look," I show Selena the photo. "This is your legacy now. Not the money or the power. This." Sarah knocks and enters. The press is waiting. They want to know what's next. Selena straightens her jacket, wipes her eyes. "Tell them the truth. Tell them this is just the beginning." My phone lights up one last time. Ralph. "Ready to take this nationwide?" I look at my sister, really look at her, and see not the woman who slammed her door, but the one who's helping thousands open new ones. "Yes," I type back. "Time to change the world." And that's how I ended up homeless, I tell the packed auditorium. But this story isn't about falling down, it's about how we help each other get back up. The audience, mostly business leaders and philanthropists, sits in rapt attention. My phone buzzes silently in my pocket, probably Olive reminding me not to forget the key points. The Rodriguez Foundation isn't just changing lives, I continue. It's changing how we think about business itself. Success doesn't have to mean stepping on others to reach the top. From the front row, Selena nods encouragingly. Behind her, Sarah leads a group of women, all former shelter residents, now employed and thriving. "Questions?" I ask as I wrap up. Hands shoot up everywhere. A reporter stands first. "Is it true the foundation is expanding to 50 new cities?" 51, actually. Selena takes the microphone. "Each with comprehensive support programs, job training, and emergency assistance." Another reporter. "And the company's profits?" "Record-breaking," Sarah answers from her seat. "Turns out doing good is good business." My phone vibrates again, Ralph sending live reactions from social media. The hashtag #RiseUpTogether is trending nationwide. After the presentation, we gather in the green room. Margaret brings coffee and updates. 3 more companies called. They want to implement our model. "And Julius," I ask, "pleaded guilty this morning. His friends on the board are next." Selena sits quietly, staring at her reflection in the window. I know that look. She's thinking about the past. "Hey," I touch her shoulder, "stop beating yourself up. I just keep thinking about all the people I could have helped before, all the doors I slammed shut. But look at all the ones you're opening now." My phone chimes, Olive sending a video from the shelter. The little girl with the tablet is teaching coding to other kids. Below it, she's written, "Your revenge turned into something beautiful." A knock at the door interrupts us. Thomas enters, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes instead of his usual suit. "I visited the shelter today," he announces. "Saw the programs in action. I'd like to volunteer, if you'll have me." Selena and I exchange glances. Another conversion. "Welcome to the revolution," Sarah says, handing him a volunteer packet. My phone lights up with an alert. Stock price hitting another record high. But that's not what matters anymore. "Remember that first night at the shelter?" I asked Selena. "When you met Sarah?" "How could I forget? It was the first time I really saw people instead of numbers." "Well," Margaret interrupts, tablet in hand, "wait until you see this." She plays a news clip. Companies across the country announcing similar foundations, following our model. The Rodriguez effect, they're calling it. "It's spreading," Sarah says proudly, "like a positive virus." More like karma, I reply, but the good kind. Selina stands suddenly. Come with me, all of you. She leads us to the auditorium's back entrance. Outside, a crowd has gathered. Women from the shelter programs, their families, employees, volunteers. This is your real legacy, I tell her. Not the company, not the money. These people. My phone buzzes one last time. Ralph. Ready for phase 3? Before I can answer, Selina takes the phone. Yes, she types. But this time, we do it together. She hands it back, then addresses the crowd. When my sister came to my door years ago, I thought I was protecting my success. Instead, I was losing my humanity. But she taught me something powerful. True success isn't what you gain, it's what you give back. The crowd cheers. Sarah squeezes my hand. Margaret wipes away a tear. So, Selina continues, today we're announcing something new. Every company that partners with us will dedicate resources to helping others rise. Not because it's good publicity, but because it's right. More cheers. My phone starts blowing up with messages. Olive, Ralph, board members, reporters. Ready to change the world? Selina asks me quietly. I look at the crowd, at Sarah teaching Thomas about the shelter programs, at Margaret coordinating with other companies, at the women whose lives we've helped transform. The world's already changing, I reply. We're just opening the doors. As the crowd disperses, Selina hugs me, really hugs me, like when we were kids. Thank you, she whispers, for not giving up on me. Thank you, I answer, for proving revenge doesn't have to destroy to make a difference. My phone lights up one final time. A message from the little girl at the shelter, sent through Olive. When I grow up, I want to open doors for people too. I show it to Selina, watching her eyes fill with tears and purpose. Well, she says, straightening her jacket, we better make sure there are plenty of doors to open. Together, we walk back into the auditorium, ready to build something bigger than revenge, bigger than success, bigger than ourselves, something that feels a lot like justice, and hope, and home.